If Richard comes within 100 yards of you, he goes straight back to jail. A piece of paper won't stop him, I said, thinking of the cold calculation in Richard's eyes when he'd realized he'd been caught. He's desperate now. His career is over, his reputation is destroyed, he's facing life in prison, he has nothing left to lose. Which is exactly why you're not leaving this apartment without a police escort, Daniel said firmly. And why I'm going to the gun safe in my closet and making sure I'm armed until this bastard is back behind bars. Sophie had gone very quiet, her crayon frozen over the coloring book. She understood enough to know the bad man was out of jail, and that scared the adults. I moved to sit beside her on the floor. Hey, sweetheart, everything's going to be okay. Uncle Danny was a police officer for a very long time. He knows how to keep us safe. I know, Sophie said in a small voice, but I'm scared anyway. Is that okay? That's very okay, I assured her. I'm scared too. But we're scared together, and that makes it easier. She leaned against me, and I wrapped my arms around her, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. This was what mattered now. Not the money Richard had stolen, not the years I'd wasted, not even the justice I craved. This child, this moment, this fragile connection to my son. A knock on the door made everyone jump. Daniel's hand moved to the gun at his waist as he approached the door cautiously. Who is it? Boston PD, Officer Martinez. Detective Morrison sent me to watch your apartment. Daniel checked through the peephole before opening the door. A young officer in uniform stood there, looking alert and professional. Sir, I'll be posted outside for the next 12 hours. My partner's watching the back entrance. Nobody gets near this apartment without going through us. Thank you, officer, Daniel said. We appreciate it. After he closed the door, I felt marginally safer. But only marginally. Richard was smart, connected, and desperate. A combination that made him extraordinarily dangerous. We need to go on offense, I said suddenly. We can't just sit here waiting for him to make a move. We need to hit him where it hurts. What do you mean? Daniel asked. His reputation, his career, everything he's built. If his law partners are standing by him, let's show them who they're really defending. Lily, you said there are videos from the church? Of the confessions? Multiple videos from multiple phones, Lily confirmed. They're all over social media already. The story went viral. Boston lawyer arrested at son's funeral. Good. Let's make sure it goes viral in the legal community too. Send those videos to the Massachusetts Bar Association. Send them to every major law firm in Boston. Send them to the newspapers and TV stations. Make sure everyone knows exactly what Richard and Emma did. Daniel was nodding slowly. Public pressure. Make it so his partners can't stand by him without destroying their own reputations. Exactly, and while we're at it, let's look into the insurance company. That $5 million policy on Thomas, there's no way they're going to pay out now that it's clearly fraud. They'll want their money back. Let's make sure they know about Emma's confession, about the murder charges, about everything. Lily was already typing on her laptop. I can draft emails right now, send them before Richard has a chance to do damage control. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a spark of something other than grief and fear. I felt purpose, direction, the determination to fight back against the people who'd destroyed my life. There's something else, I added. Thomas's private investigator, Marcus Chen. He has 3 weeks of surveillance on Richard and Emma. I want copies of everything. Every photo, every video, every piece of documentation. If Richard thinks he can buy his way out of this, I want to bury him in evidence so deep he'll never see daylight again. Now you're talking, Daniel said with grim satisfaction. Let's destroy this son of a bitch the legal way with truth, evidence, and public opinion. By the time we're done, Richard Hayes won't be able to get a job defending parking tickets. Sophie looked up from her coloring. Are you going to put the bad man back in jail, Grandma Margaret? I met her eyes, Thomas's eyes, and made her a promise. Yes, sweetheart. One way or another, the bad man is going back to jail, and this time, he's staying there. Outside, snow began to fall again, covering Boston in fresh white powder that made everything look clean and new. But I knew the truth now. Some stains went too deep to ever wash away. And Richard Hayes was about to learn that destroying a woman's family doesn't make her weak. It makes her absolutely unstoppable. Judith Chen's law office was in a renovated brownstone in Cambridge, just across the river from Boston. Daniel drove us there at 10 o'clock, with Officer Martinez following in his patrol car. Lily and Sophie stayed at the apartment with another officer standing guard. We decided it was better not to bring an 8-year-old to discussions about murder and financial fraud. The office itself was warm and professional, with dark wood furniture and walls lined with law books. Judith Chen was a woman in her early 60s with steel gray hair pulled into a neat bun and sharp, intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She shook my hand firmly when we arrived. "Mrs. Hayes, I'm so sorry for your loss and for everything you're going through. Please, sit down. I've already started reviewing the information Detective Morrison forwarded to me, and I have to say, this is one of the most complex cases I've encountered in 30 years of practice." We settled into leather chairs across from her massive desk. She had several thick folders spread out, color-coded tabs marking different sections. "Let me start by outlining what we're dealing with," Judith began, pulling out a legal pad. "First, there's the criminal case against Richard and Emma. That's the district attorney's responsibility, not ours. But we need to monitor it closely because the outcomes there will affect everything else." "What are the chances they'll be convicted?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Judith's expression was carefully neutral. "In my experience, cases with this much physical evidence and multiple confessions, especially confessions recorded by dozens of witnesses, usually result in convictions. But Richard is a skilled attorney with powerful friends. He'll fight every step of the way. We need to be prepared for a long, ugly trial." "How long are we talking about?" 18 months to 2 years before it goes to trial. Maybe longer if they file multiple appeals and motions. The justice system moves slowly, Mrs. Hayes. 2 years. 2 more years of living in fear, of looking over my shoulder, of waiting for closure that might never come. The thought was almost unbearable. "Second," Judith continued, "there's your divorce. Massachusetts is a no-fault divorce state, but given the circumstances, the affair, the theft, the attempted murder, we can argue for an immediate separation of assets and a fast-track divorce based on irretrievable breakdown with aggravating factors." "How fast?" 6 to 8 months, possibly sooner if Richard doesn't contest it. And frankly, he'd be insane to contest it. The publicity alone would destroy any remaining credibility he has. "He made bail," Daniel interjected. "His law partners put up $10 million. That tells me they're standing by him, which means he might have the resources to fight." Judith's jaw tightened. "I heard about the bail. It's unconscionable. But Mrs. Hayes, I need to ask you something difficult. Do you have any life insurance policies on yourself?" The question sent ice through my veins. "Yes. $250,000 through the university's retirement plan. Why?" "Because if Richard is still listed as your beneficiary, we need to change that immediately. Given Emma's confession that they plan to kill you for your assets, you are in genuine danger as long as he stands to profit from your death." My hands started trembling. I'd been so focused on Thomas's murder that I hadn't fully processed the fact that I'd been their next intended victim. "I'll change it today," I managed to say. "Who should I list instead?" "Do you have other family besides your brother?" I thought of my quiet life, my university colleagues, my book club friends, the neighbors I'd known for decades. None of them felt like family in the way that mattered. "Sophie," I said suddenly. "My granddaughter. Thomas's daughter. I want her to be my beneficiary." Judith made a note. "Excellent choice. We'll need to set up a trust for her since she's a minor, but that's straightforward. Now, third issue, recovering your stolen assets. You said approximately $177,000 is missing from your accounts?" "That's what I found so far. But I haven't done a complete audit. There could be more." "We'll need forensic accountants to trace every transaction," Judith said. "It's expensive, probably $15,000 to $20,000 for a thorough analysis, but necessary if we want to recover your money. The good news is that if Richard stole from you to fund the murder plot, those assets can be seized as proceeds of a crime." $20,000 for accountants, money I didn't have because Richard had stolen it. The irony was crushing. "I'll pay for it," Daniel said quietly. "Consider it a loan, Maggie. You can pay me back when you get your money back." "Danny, you can't afford. I have my pension and my savings. And you're my sister. Family helps family. That's how this works." Tears stung my eyes. After years of Richard driving a wedge between us, Daniel was here, supporting me without hesitation or judgment. Fourth issue, Judith continued, is Thomas's estate. As his surviving parent, you have a claim to his assets. Emma, as his widow, would normally have a claim too. But given that she murdered him, the Slayer statute prevents her from inheriting. What about Sophie? I asked. She's his daughter. Shouldn't she inherit? Absolutely. In fact, Sophie should be the primary beneficiary. But here's where it gets complicated. Did Thomas acknowledge paternity legally? Is his name on Sophie's birth certificate? I looked at Daniel, then back at Judith. I don't know. Lily would know. We need to find out. If Thomas never legally acknowledged Sophie, we'll need to do a paternity test and go through the courts to establish her as his heir. It's doable, but it adds time and complexity. My head was spinning with all the legal complications. I'd thought once Richard and Emma were arrested, the hard part would be over, but this was just the beginning of a years-long battle. There's one more thing, Judith said, her voice dropping, and this is the most concerning. Mrs. Hayes, I had my paralegal do some preliminary research into Richard's financial situation. What we found is troubling. What do you mean? Richard has been moving money, lots of money. Over the past 6 months, he's transferred approximately $400,000 offshore to accounts in the Cayman Islands. The number hit me like a physical blow. $400,000? Where did he even get that much? Some of it came from your joint accounts, that's part of the $177,000 you noticed missing, but the rest appears to have come from his law firm's client escrow accounts. Daniel swore under his breath. He's been embezzling from his own clients? It appears so, which explains why the Bar Association was investigating him. Mrs. Hayes, your husband didn't just steal from you and plan to murder his son for insurance money. He's been running a sophisticated embezzlement scheme for at least a year, possibly longer. I felt like the ground was disappearing beneath me. Every revelation made Richard more of a stranger, less like the man I thought I'd known for 43 years. Why? I whispered. Why would he do all this? We had enough money. We were comfortable. Why risk everything? Judith leaned forward, her expression sympathetic but honest. In my experience, Mrs. Hayes, it's rarely about need. It's about greed and entitlement. Men like Richard believe the rules don't apply to them. They believe they're smarter than everyone else, that they can get away with anything, and often they do until they don't. Can we get the offshore money back? It's difficult, but not impossible. We'll need to work with federal authorities, possibly the FBI if we can prove wire fraud across international borders. But I won't lie to you, offshore asset recovery is expensive, time-consuming, and often unsuccessful. The Cayman Islands have very strict banking secrecy laws. Another dead end. Another way Richard had outmaneuvered me, planned ahead, protected himself while destroying everyone around him. However, Judith continued, there is some good news. If Richard has been embezzling from his law firm, the firm itself has deep pockets. Once they realize what he's done, they'll want to make it right to avoid their own liability. We may be able to recover your losses from them as part of a settlement. Why would they pay for what Richard did? Because they employed him, trusted him with client funds, and failed to catch his embezzlement. That's negligent supervision. They'll pay to avoid a lawsuit that could destroy their reputation and expose them to disciplinary action from the Bar Association. It was something, at least. A glimmer of hope in the darkness. What do you need from me? I asked. Everything. Bank statements going back 5 years. Tax returns, investment account statements, copies of your mortgage documents, insurance policies, retirement accounts, everything. We need to establish exactly what you had before Richard started stealing, so we know what we're fighting to recover. Most of that paperwork is at my house. Which is still a crime scene, Daniel reminded me. Morrison said we can't access it for at least another week while they process evidence. Judith nodded. That's fine. In the meantime, Mrs. Hayes, I need you to do several things. First, contact every financial institution where you have accounts, banks, investment firms, credit card companies. Tell them your identity may have been compromised and you need to freeze everything. Change every password. Enable two-factor authentication on every account. She handed me a typed list. Second, file a police report specifically about the financial fraud. That creates an official record separate from the murder charges. Third, contact the 3 credit bureaus Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion and put a fraud alert on your credit report. Richard may try to open new accounts in your name or take out loans against your assets. The list felt overwhelming, but I forced myself to focus, one step at a time. Fourth, and this is important, do not speak to Richard or Emma under any circumstances. If they contact you, don't answer. Don't read emails or texts from them. Don't engage. Anything you say could be used against you or twisted in court. If they violate the restraining order by contacting you, call the police immediately. What if they send someone else to contact me? A friend or a lawyer? Then you refer that person to me. I'm your attorney now. All communication goes through me. The protection of having a lawyer, a professional barrier between me and Richard's manipulation, felt like a shield I desperately needed. How much is this going to cost? I asked, dreading the answer. My retainer is $10,000 for family law cases. Given the complexity here, the murder charges, the embezzlement, the offshore accounts, this could run to $50,000 or $60,000 in legal fees over the next year. Maybe more if we have to go to trial on the civil matters. $60,000, money I didn't have because Richard had stolen it. The vicious circle made me want to scream. I'll cover it, Daniel said again. Maggie, don't even think about the money. We'll figure it out. Danny, you can't pay for everything. Watch me. His voice had that stubborn quality I remembered from childhood. That bastard took everything from you. He's not taking your ability to fight back too. Judith closed her folders and stood up. Mrs. Hayes, I know this is overwhelming. You're grieving your son, dealing with betrayal, facing financial ruin, and recovering from a murder attempt. But you're stronger than you know, and you're not alone. You have your brother, you have Lily and Sophie, and you have me. We're going to get through this together. And when it's over? I asked. When Richard is finally in prison and the money is recovered and the dust settles, what then? How do I rebuild a life after this? Judith's smile was sad but genuine. One day at a time, Mrs. Hayes. One day at a time. As we left her office, snow was falling again, thick and heavy. Boston looked peaceful under its white blanket, but I knew the city was rotting underneath. Corruption and violence hiding behind beautiful facades. Just like my marriage had been. Maggie, Daniel said as we got into his car, I know this is hard, but you're doing great. You're fighting. That's all that matters right now. I don't feel like I'm fighting, I admitted. I feel like I'm drowning. Fighting and drowning look pretty similar, Daniel said. The difference is, when you're fighting, you don't stop struggling. And you, big sister, have never stopped struggling. Not once. I leaned my head against the cold car window and closed my eyes. Somewhere in Boston, Richard was free, planning his next move. And I had to be ready for whatever came next. Because this war was far from over. We went straight from Judith Chen's office to my bank, Boston First Federal on Boylston Street. Daniel insisted Officer Martinez accompany us, and I was grateful for his presence. The thought of running into Richard anywhere public made my skin crawl. The bank was busy despite the day after Christmas. People returning gift checks, dealing with holiday shopping debt, going about their normal lives while mine had exploded into chaos. I approached the customer service desk, and a young woman with a bright smile greeted me. Good morning, how can I help you today? I need to speak with a manager, please. It's urgent. My name is Margaret Hayes. Something in my voice, the exhaustion, the desperation, the barely contained panic made her smile fade. Of course, let me get Mr. Peterson for you. One moment. She disappeared into a back office, and I stood there trying to control my breathing. Daniel put a steadying hand on my shoulder. You've got this, Maggie. Mr. Peterson emerged, a balding man in his 50s, wearing a gray suit and an expression of professional concern. Mrs. Hayes? I'm Branch Manager Peterson. How can I assist you? I need to freeze all my accounts immediately. My husband has been stealing from me, and he's currently out on bail for murder charges. I need to protect what little money I have left. Mr. Peterson's eyes widened. Murder charges? Mrs. Hayes, perhaps we should speak in my office. He led us to a small, windowless room with a desk and several chairs. Officer Martinez positioned himself by the door. Once we were seated, I pulled up my banking app on my phone. These are my accounts. My savings account has been drained from $160,000 to $12,300. My checking account went from $32,000 to just over $4,000. I never authorized these withdrawals. My husband, Richard Hayes, has been stealing from me to fund an affair and a murder plot. Mr. Peterson's face had gone pale. Mrs. Hayes, this is extremely serious. Let me pull up your accounts. He typed on his computer, his expression growing more troubled with each keystroke. I see what you mean. There have been significant withdrawals over the past 6 months. Most of them were done through online banking, using the joint account holder's credentials that would be your husband. Can you tell me exactly when and where the money went? Mr. Peterson hesitated. Mrs. Hayes, I'm not sure I should share that information without proper legal. My husband murdered our son. The words came out flat and cold. He cut the brake lines on Thomas's car and watched him drive to his death so he could collect $5 million in life insurance. Then he planned to kill me too so he could inherit my assets. I have a right to know what he did with my money. The silence in the room was absolute. Mr. Peterson stared at me, then at Daniel, then at Officer Martinez, whose solemn nod confirmed I was telling the truth. I'm so sorry, Mr. Peterson stammered. Let me see what I can access. He clicked through several screens. The withdrawals were primarily cash advances, $5,000 here, $7,000 there, never more than $10,000 at a time. That's a common tactic to avoid triggering federal reporting requirements. Anything over $10,000 has to be reported to the Treasury Department. So he deliberately stayed under the radar, Daniel said. It appears so. There were also several wire transfers. One to an account at Cayman National Bank for $50,000, another to the same account for $75,000, and he paused, his face growing even more troubled. Mrs. Hayes, there was a transfer of $30,000 to an Emma Hayes just last week, December 18th. My daughter-in-law. Richard had given her $30,000 of my money just days before they killed Thomas. Can any of this be reversed? I asked. The wire transfers to the Cayman Islands, those are gone, I'm afraid. International transfers are nearly impossible to reverse once completed. But the payment to Emma Hayes might be recoverable if we can prove fraud and get a court order. What do I need to do to freeze everything? I can place a hold on your accounts right now. No withdrawals, no transfers, nothing moves without your physical presence and identification. We'll also remove Richard Hayes as a joint account holder. But Mrs. Hayes, I need to warn you this will cause significant problems. If your husband has any automatic payments set up, they'll bounce. If he tries to use a debit card, it'll be declined. He'll know immediately that you've locked him out. Good, I said. Let him know. He's already tried to kill me once. A little inconvenience is the least he deserves. Mr. Peterson made a series of phone calls, typing rapidly between conversations. After 20 minutes, he looked up. It's done. All accounts frozen. Your husband removed as joint holder. I've also flagged your social security number in our system so no new accounts can be opened without you appearing in person with 2 forms of identification. What about credit cards? Do you have any joint credit cards with your husband? I thought about it. Yes, 3. A Visa, a MasterCard, and an American Express. You need to call those companies immediately and cancel the cards. Close the accounts entirely. If you keep them open, your husband can still charge on them, even if you freeze your bank accounts. Daniel was already pulling out his phone. Give me the numbers. I'll call them right now. While Daniel made the calls, Mr. Peterson continued typing. Mrs. Hayes, I'm looking at your account history, and I'm seeing something else concerning. There were several large deposits into your checking account over the past year. $10,000 here, $15,000 there. Do you know where those came from? No. Richard handled our finances. I just assumed they were from his law practice. Or our investments. They're not from any legitimate source I can trace. The deposits came from something called HTC Consulting Group. Does that mean anything to you? I shook my head. Daniel, still on hold with American Express, leaned over to look at the screen. HTC Consulting, he muttered. That sounds like a shell company. Maggie, I bet that's where Richard was laundering the money he embezzled from his law firm. Mr. Peterson's expression grew even more alarmed. If these deposits are from illegal activity, Mrs. Hayes, your accounts could be subject to civil asset forfeiture. The government could freeze everything and seize the funds as proceeds of crime. But I didn't know about it. I didn't do anything wrong. I understand, but the law doesn't care who knew what. If money from illegal activity passes through your account, that account can be frozen. You need a good lawyer immediately. I have one, I said. Judith Chen. I just left her office an hour ago. Good. Call her right now and tell her about these deposits. She needs to know before the feds figure it out. With shaking hands, I dialed Judith's number. She answered on the second ring. Mrs. Hayes? Is everything all right? No. I'm at the bank, and they found deposits in my account from something called HTC Consulting. The manager thinks it might be a shell company Richard used to launder embezzled funds. He says my accounts could be seized. Judith swore something I hadn't expected from the polished attorney. How much in total deposits? I looked at Mr. Peterson, who was adding numbers on his computer. $115,000 over the past 14 months, he said. Did you hear that? I asked Judith. I heard. Okay, here's what we do. You need to file a suspicious activity report with the bank immediately. That establishes that you're cooperating with authorities and had no knowledge of illegal activity. Mr. Peterson can help you with that. Then I need copies of every statement showing those deposits. We're going to get ahead of this before it gets ahead of us. Will I lose all my money? Not if I have anything to say about it. But Margaret, this is going to get worse before it gets better. Richard didn't just steal from you, he used you. Your accounts, your identity, your good name. He turned you into an unwitting accomplice. The full horror of it washed over me. Richard hadn't just betrayed me personally, he'd made me complicit in his crimes. If federal investigators looked at my accounts, they'd see large deposits followed by large withdrawals and wire transfers to offshore accounts. It looked like money laundering, because it was money laundering with me as the patsy. I need to sit down, I said, even though I was already sitting. The room was spinning. Daniel took the phone from my hand. Judith, it's Daniel Cooper. What do we need to do right now? I heard her voice through the phone, rapid-fire instructions. Daniel took notes, asked questions, his detective training kicking in. Mr. Peterson brought me water and quietly suggested I might want to lie down in the employee break room. No, I said. No, I need to finish this. I need to file that report. I need to do everything right. For the next hour, we filled out paperwork. I signed forms stating I had no knowledge of the deposit's origin. I authorized the bank to share all my records with law enforcement. I provided Judith's contact information as my attorney. By the time we finished, my hand was cramping from signing my name so many times. Mrs. Hayes, Mr. Peterson said as we prepared to leave, I want you to know that I believe you. I've been in banking for 25 years, and I can usually tell when someone is trying to deceive me. You're not a criminal. You're a victim, and I'm going to make sure everyone at this bank knows that. Thank you, I whispered. As we left the bank, the December cold hit me like a wall. I stood on the sidewalk, watching people hurry past with shopping bags and coffee cups, going about their ordinary lives. I would never have an ordinary life again. Maggie, Daniel said gently, we should get you back to the apartment. You need rest. I need to warn Lily, I said suddenly. If Richard used my accounts to launder money, he might have done the same thing to Thomas. Lily could be in danger of asset forfeiture too. Daniel pulled out his phone. I'll call her right now. But Maggie, you need to breathe. You're hyperventilating. He was right. My chest was tight, my vision narrowing. I bent over, hands on my knees, trying to force air into my lungs. That's it, Daniel coached. In through your nose, out through your mouth. You're okay, you're safe. We're going to fix this. But would we? Every time I thought I understood the full scope of Richard's betrayal, another layer revealed itself. The affair, the murder, the embezzlement, the money laundering. How much more was there? What other crimes had he committed using my identity, my trust, my life as cover? A car pulled up to the curb, a silver Mercedes with tinted windows. My heart stopped. That was Richard's car. He was here. Danny, I gasped, grabbing my brother's arm. The driver's door opened, and a man stepped out. But it wasn't Richard. It was someone I didn't recognize, a man in his 30s wearing an expensive suit and a cold expression. Margaret Hayes? He called out. Daniel moved in front of me protectively. Who's asking? My name is Marcus Bradford. I'm an attorney with Whitmore & Associates, Richard Hayes' law firm. I need to speak with Mrs. Hayes about her husband's situation. My client has no comment, Daniel said firmly. I'm not a reporter, Mr. Cooper. I'm here in a professional capacity. Mrs. Hayes, your husband has asked me to negotiate a settlement. He's willing to make this all go away if you'll agree to certain terms. The audacity of it took my breath away. Richard had sent his lawyer to buy my silence, to make a deal, to treat Thomas's murder like a business transaction that could be settled with the right offer. Tell my husband, I said, my voice shaking with rage, that there is no settlement. There is no deal. There is only justice. And if he comes near me or my family again, I will make it my life's mission to see him rot in prison until the day he dies. Marcus Bradford's expression didn't change. Mrs. Hayes, you should know that your husband has resources you don't. He has the full support of our firm's legal team. He has connections throughout the Boston legal community. And he has information about your own financial dealings that could be very embarrassing if made public. Is that a threat? Daniel asked. It's a reality check. Mrs. Hayes, your accounts are under federal investigation for money laundering. Your name is on those transactions. If this goes to trial, prosecutors will paint you as a co-conspirator who turned on her husband to save herself. Your reputation will be destroyed. Your money will be seized. You could face criminal charges yourself. Get away from my sister, Daniel growled. Now, before I have Officer Martinez arrest you for harassment. Marcus Bradford smiled thinly. There's no harassment in delivering a message from a client. Mrs. Hayes, my card. When you're ready to be reasonable, call me. The offer won't be on the table forever. He dropped a business card at my feet and got back in the Mercedes. As he drove away, I stared at the card lying in the slush. Richard was threatening me. Using his lawyers, his connections, his stolen money to threaten the woman whose son he'd murdered. That son of a bitch, Daniel said. Maggie, we need to report this to Detective Morrison. That was witness intimidation. It was a message, I said quietly. Richard wants me to know he's not beaten yet. That he still has power. That he can still hurt me. I picked up the card and tore it in half, then in quarters, letting the pieces fall into the dirty snow. Well, here's my message to Richard, I said. I'm not backing down, I'm not making a deal, and I'm not afraid of him anymore. He can threaten me all he wants. He's already taken everything that mattered. He has nothing left to take. Daniel pulled me into a hug. That's my sister. Now let's get you home before you collapse. You've had enough for one day. But as we drove back to Somerville, I knew the truth. There would never be enough fighting for one day. Not until Richard Hayes was behind bars where he belonged. And I would fight every single day if that's what it took. When we returned to Daniel's apartment, Lily was pacing in the small living room, her phone pressed to her ear. Sophie sat at the kitchen table coloring, but her crayons moved listlessly across the paper. Both of them looked up when we entered, relief flooding their faces. She's here, Lily said into the phone. Yes, I'll tell her. She hung up and turned to me. That was Marcus Chen Thomas's private investigator. He saw the news about the arrests, and he wants to meet with you. He says he has more evidence than what he sent to Thomas. Things he didn't include in the official report. More evidence? I sank onto the couch, exhaustion pulling at every muscle. What kind of evidence? He wouldn't say over the phone, but Margaret, he sounded scared. He said Thomas wasn't the only one Richard threatened. He said Richard knew Marcus was investigating him and tried to buy him off. When that didn't work, Richard threatened to destroy his business, his reputation, everything. Daniel was already pulling out his phone. Where does he want to meet? His office on Newbury Street, but he said to come before 5 o'clock. He's closing early and leaving town for a few days. He doesn't feel safe staying in Boston while Richard is out on bail. I didn't blame him. I didn't feel safe either, and I had a police officer standing guard outside the apartment. Let's go now, I said, forcing myself to stand despite every cell in my body screaming for rest. If he has evidence that can put Richard away forever, I need it. Sophie came running over, wrapping her arms around my waist. Do you have to go, Grandma Margaret? Can't you stay here where it's safe? I knelt down to her level, ignoring the protest from my 77-year-old knees. Sweetheart, I'm doing this for your daddy. To make sure the bad people who hurt him can never hurt anyone else. Do you understand? She nodded solemnly. Mommy says Daddy was brave. She says he tried to stop the bad people. He did. He was very brave. And now I have to be brave too. Sophie hugged me tighter. Okay, but come back soon. I promise. Marcus Chen's office was in a narrow brownstone on Newbury Street, sandwiched between an art gallery and an expensive boutique. The sign on the door read Chen Investigations, by appointment only. Daniel rang the bell, and after a moment, a voice came through the intercom. Mrs. Hayes? Yes, I'm here with my brother Daniel Cooper and Officer Martinez. The door buzzed open. We climbed 2 flights of stairs to find Marcus Chen waiting in the hallway. He was a man in his 40s, compact and muscular with sharp eyes that constantly scanned his surroundings. Former military, I guessed. Or law enforcement. Mrs. Hayes, thank you for coming. He shook my hand, then Daniel's. Officer, I appreciate the escort. Please come in. His office was small but efficiently organized. Multiple computer monitors lined one wall, currently showing what looked like security camera feeds of the building's entrances. Filing cabinets filled another wall. A desk held neat stacks of folders, each labeled with dates and case numbers. Thomas hired me in September, Marcus began without preamble. He suspected his wife was having an affair and wanted proof for divorce proceedings. What I found was much worse than a simple affair. He pulled out 3 thick folders and spread them across his desk. I surveilled Emma Hayes for 3 weeks. During that time, I documented her meeting with Richard Hayes, Thomas's father, on 8 separate occasions at the Chateau Marmont Hotel. But there were other meetings I didn't include in my official report to Thomas. Why not? Daniel asked. Because I wasn't sure they were relevant. And honestly, I was trying to spare Thomas some pain. But now that he's dead, Marcus's jaw tightened. Now everything is relevant. He opened the first folder. Emma Hayes met with a man named Viktor Fedorov 6 times during my surveillance period. Fedorov is a known associate of the Novak crime family, Russian organized crime operating out of Brighton Beach in New York. The words organized crime made my stomach drop. What could Emma possibly want with the Russian mob? Money laundering services, apparently. Marcus pulled out several photographs showing Emma meeting with a heavy-set man in expensive suits. Fedorov specializes in moving illegal money offshore and making it look legitimate. His usual clients are drug dealers, human traffickers, corrupt politicians, but he'll work with anyone who can afford his fees. How much are his fees? I asked, though I dreaded the answer. 10% of whatever you're laundering. So if Richard and Emma were moving $400,000 offshore, Fedorov would have taken $40,000 as his cut. Daniel leaned forward, studying the photos. This connects Richard to organized crime. That's a whole new level of federal charges. RICO, conspiracy, maybe even racketeering. There's more, Marcus said grimly. He opened the second folder. I also followed Richard Hayes when he wasn't with Emma. I wanted to understand his patterns, his associates. On 3 occasions, I observed him meeting with a Dr. Leonard Morrison at Mass General Hospital. A doctor? I was confused. What's criminal about that? Dr. Morrison is a cardiologist who's been under investigation by the Massachusetts Medical Board for insurance fraud. He bills procedures that were never performed, prescribes unnecessary tests, that sort of thing. But more relevant to your situation, he's known for writing fake medical reports for insurance purposes. The pieces clicked together in my mind with sickening clarity. The life insurance policy on Thomas. The $5 million policy. The insurance company would have required medical exams, health reports. Exactly. I believe Richard paid Dr. Morrison to falsify Thomas's medical records to make him appear healthier than he was, or to hide any potential red flags that would have made the insurance company suspicious about such a large policy on a 26-year-old. Can you prove this? Daniel asked. I have photos of Richard meeting with Dr. Morrison. I have financial records showing a payment of $50,000 from Richard to a shell company Dr. Morrison controls. And I have testimony my own about what I witnessed. But what I don't have is the actual falsified medical report. That would be in the insurance company's files. We can subpoena those, Daniel said. If they show inconsistencies or forgeries, that's insurance fraud on top of everything else. Marcus pulled out the third folder, and his expression grew even darker. This is the part I really didn't want to tell Thomas. And Mrs. Hayes, I'm sorry to tell you now, but you need to know. My hands were shaking as I reached for the folder. Inside were more photographs, and these made my blood run cold. Richard and Emma, yes. But they weren't alone. There was a third person in several photos, a young man, maybe 23 or 24, with bleached blonde hair and designer clothes. "Who is that?" I whispered. "His name is Justin Crawford. He's Emma's ex-boyfriend from college. According to my research, they dated for 2 years before Emma met Thomas. They broke up when Emma graduated, supposedly because Justin wanted to move to California and Emma wanted to stay in Boston. But they didn't really break up," Daniel said, studying the photos. "No, they stayed in contact. And about a year ago, Justin moved back to Boston. He's been living in the Cambridge apartment that Richard was renting, the one I told you about earlier. Emma would visit him there when she wasn't meeting with Richard. I felt like I was going to be sick. So Emma was having affairs with both Richard and her ex-boyfriend? It gets worse. Justin Crawford has a criminal record. Fraud, identity theft, credit card scams. He served 18 months in federal prison and was released 2 years ago. Mrs. Hayes, I believe Emma brought him back into her life specifically to help with the scheme against Thomas." "What scheme?" I asked, though I was terrified of the answer. Marcus pulled out the final documents in the folder, printed emails, text messages, records he'd somehow obtained through means I probably didn't want to know about. "Emma, Richard, and Justin have been planning this for over a year. The emails show they initially considered divorcing Thomas after the wedding, claiming abuse to get a sympathetic settlement. When that seemed too complicated, they moved to Plan B life insurance fraud and murder." He pointed to a series of text messages between Emma and Justin. "Richard says we need to be patient. At least 6 months after the wedding before we move forward. 6 months is too long. I'm broke. When do I get my cut? You'll get your share when the insurance pays out. 2 million for you, 2 million for me, 1 million for Richard. And the old lady? She's worth 3 million. We'll split her estate after Richard inherits. How long until she dies? A year, maybe less. Richard says it has to look natural." I couldn't breathe. The room was spinning. They'd been planning to murder me from the beginning. Before Thomas was even dead, they were already dividing up my estate like vultures over a corpse. "Mrs. Hayes?" Marcus's voice seemed to come from far away. "Are you all right?" "No, I managed." "No, I'm not all right. My husband conspired with my daughter-in-law and her criminal ex-boyfriend to murder my son and then murder me. How could I possibly be all right?" Daniel's arm came around my shoulders, steadying me. "Marcus, do the police have copies of all this?" "Not yet. I was waiting to give Thomas the complete package, but when he died, I wasn't sure what to do. I couldn't go to the police without exposing that I'd obtained some of this evidence through, let's say, questionable means. Hacking into email accounts, for instance. That evidence might not be admissible in court, but it points investigators in the right direction," Daniel said. "Even if they can't use your emails, they can get legal warrants to search Emma's and Richard's devices based on probable cause. This gives them that cause." "Exactly, which is why I'm giving it all to Mrs. Hayes now. What she does with it is her decision." He handed me the folders. They felt impossibly heavy, weighted with evidence of betrayal so profound I still couldn't fully comprehend it. "There's one more thing," Marcus said quietly. "Justin Crawford left Boston yesterday. He bought a one-way ticket to Sao Paulo, Brazil. Brazil has no extradition treaty with the United States. He's running. Because he knows Richard and Emma were arrested," Daniel said. "He knows the whole scheme is falling apart. We need to tell Detective Morrison," I said. "He needs to know about Justin Crawford before he disappears forever, and he needs to know about Viktor Fedorov and Dr. Morrison. Richard isn't just a murderer, he's connected to organized crime, insurance fraud, money laundering. This is so much bigger than I thought. If this moment truly hit home for you, don't forget to tap that like button. It tells me you're right here with me. Can you see a bit of yourself in this story? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear what part spoke to you most." Marcus nodded. "I've already put together a complete summary for the police. Everything I witnessed, everyone I saw Richard and Emma meeting with, every suspicious transaction. It's all documented with dates, times, and photographs. But Mrs. Hayes, I need you to understand something. When this information becomes public, it's going to be a media circus. The Russian mob connection, the conspiracy with multiple people, the plot to kill you for your inheritance. This is going to be national news. I don't care about the media, I said. I care about justice. I care about making sure every single person involved in my son's murder pays for what they did. Then take these files. Give them to the police. Let them do their job. Marcus's expression was grave. But be careful. You're not just dealing with Richard anymore. You're dealing with organized crime. These people don't leave loose ends. Are you saying I'm in danger from the Russian mob? The question sounded insane, like something from a movie, not my real life. I'm saying you should be very, very careful. Viktor Fedorov doesn't like people who cooperate with law enforcement. And if he thinks you're going to expose his money laundering operation, he might decide you're a problem that needs to be eliminated. The weight of it crashed over me. I'd thought facing Richard in court was the worst I'd have to endure. Now I was caught up in organized crime, conspiracy networks, a web of corruption so vast I couldn't see the edges. We need to go, Daniel said urgently. Now, Maggie, you're staying at my place tonight under police protection. No arguments. As we left Marcus Chen's office, clutching folders full of damning evidence, I looked back at him. Thank you, I said, for helping Thomas. For continuing to fight even after he died. Thomas was a good man trying to do the right thing, Marcus replied. The least I can do is make sure his killers face justice. All of them. On the street, snow was falling again, covering Boston in a fresh layer of white innocence that hid the rot beneath. And I was beginning to understand that the rot went deeper than I'd ever imagined. We drove straight to Boston Police Headquarters, the folders from Marcus Chen stacked on my lap like a time bomb. Officer Martinez followed in his patrol car, lights flashing to clear traffic. Daniel drove in tense silence, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Detective Morrison met us in the lobby, his face drawn with exhaustion. He'd clearly been working around the clock since the arrests at the funeral. Mrs. Hayes, Mr. Cooper, come with me. He led us to a conference room that smelled of stale coffee and desperation. Another detective was already there, a woman in her 40s with intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense expression. This is Detective Sarah Reeves from our Financial Crimes Unit, Morrison said. Given what you've told me about the money laundering and embezzlement, I thought she should be present. I spread the folders across the conference table. Thomas's private investigator gave us these. There's evidence of connections to organized crime, insurance fraud, and a third conspirator named Justin Crawford, who just fled to Brazil. Both detectives leaned forward, and for the next hour, I walked them through everything Marcus Chen had documented. The meetings with Viktor Fedorov, the payments to Dr. Morrison for falsified medical records, the text messages showing Emma, Richard, and Justin planning not just Thomas's murder, but mine as well. Detective Reeves was making rapid notes on her laptop. Mrs. Hayes, this changes everything. If we can prove Richard Hayes was laundering money for the Novak crime family, we can bring in the FBI. That's federal racketeering, RICO violations. We're talking 30 years minimum, possibly life. But can you prove it? Daniel asked. Marcus obtained some of this evidence through illegal means. Will it hold up in court? The electronic communications might not be admissible, Detective Morrison admitted, but they give us probable cause for legal warrants. We can subpoena Richard's phone records, his computer, his email accounts. If the evidence is there, we'll find it the legal way. What about Justin Crawford? I asked. Marcus said he fled to Brazil yesterday. Brazil doesn't have an extradition treaty with the U.S., but that doesn't mean he's safe, Detective Reeves said. We can file charges here and issue an international arrest warrant. If he ever leaves Brazil, we'll grab him. And if Brazilian authorities decide to cooperate, which they sometimes do in murder cases, we might get him sooner. Detective Morrison pulled up something on his own laptop. Mrs. Hayes, I need to show you something, and I want you to prepare yourself because it's disturbing. He turned the screen toward me. It showed a surveillance video from what looked like a parking garage. The timestamp read December 11th, the night before Thomas died. This is from the parking garage where Thomas's mechanic, Jake Morrison, kept his shop. Watch what happens at 2:17 a.m. The grainy black and white footage showed a figure in dark clothing entering the frame. The person moved quickly to a car, Thomas's car, I realized with a sickening lurch, and climbed into the driver's seat. 30 seconds later, the car's headlights came on and it drove away. We enhanced the footage and ran facial recognition, Detective Morrison said quietly. That's Richard Hayes stealing his own son's car from the mechanic's garage, the car with cut brake lines that Jake had told Thomas was too dangerous to drive. He stole it back, I whispered. So Thomas would drive it the next day and die. Yes, and we have more. Watch this. He pulled up another video, this one from a traffic camera on Memorial Drive. It showed Richard's Mercedes parked on the side of the road near MIT. The timestamp was December 9, 3 days before Thomas's death. A figure emerged from a building. Emma, she walked to the Mercedes and got in. The car drove away. That's the Cambridge apartment Richard was renting, Detective Morrison explained. Emma was there for 4 hours that afternoon. And based on cell phone tower data, Richard's phone was in that location at the same time. They were planning it, Daniel said. Coordinating the murder. We believe so. And here's where it gets interesting. Detective Morrison pulled up a third video. This is from a CVS pharmacy near the apartment, same day. Watch who comes in. The footage showed Richard entering the pharmacy and going to the automotive section. He picked up several items and brought them to the counter. The detective zoomed in on the items. Hacksaw blades, he said. Heavy-duty work gloves, wire cutters, and a mechanic's guide for brake systems. He paid cash, probably thinking we'd never trace it. But we did. The evidence was overwhelming. Video of Richard buying the tools to sabotage Thomas's car. Video of him stealing the car back from the mechanic. Cell phone data placing him and Emma together while they planned. It was premeditation documented in excruciating detail. Why are you showing me this? I asked. Don't you already have enough to convict him? We do, Detective Morrison said. But Mrs. Hayes, there's a complication. Richard's lawyers are arguing that he was coerced by Emma. They're claiming she manipulated him, threatened to expose the affair, forced him into the plot. They're trying to paint him as a victim. That's ridiculous, I said. The evidence shows he was an active participant. He bought the tools. He stole the car. I know, and the jury will see that, but his lawyers are good and they're already working on a defense strategy. Which brings me to my next point. Morrison's expression grew even more serious. Mrs. Hayes, we need you to testify at trial. The jury needs to hear from you about the marriage, about Richard's behavior, about the financial fraud. You're the most important witness we have. My stomach clenched. Testify? In front of Richard? In front of reporters and cameras and… I know it's terrifying, Morrison said gently. But without your testimony, Richard's lawyers might create reasonable doubt. They'll say you're a bitter ex-wife making accusations. They'll claim the evidence is circumstantial. Your voice, your story, that's what will convince a jury that Richard Hayes is a cold-blooded killer who murdered his own son for money. I looked at Daniel, who nodded encouragingly, then at Detective Reeves, who was watching me with sympathy but also expectation. How long until the trial? I asked. Probably 18 months, maybe 2 years. The discovery process is lengthy, especially with this much evidence. And Richard's lawyers will file every motion they can to delay. 2 more years of living in limbo. 2 more years of fear and anxiety and waiting for justice. I'll do it, I said. Whatever you need. I'll testify. Thank you, Mrs. Hayes. Detective Morrison closed his laptop. Now, there's something else we need to discuss. The Novak crime family connection that makes you a target. Not just from Richard, but from Viktor Fedorov and his associates. If they think you're going to testify about their money laundering operation, they might try to silence you. Silence me? You mean kill me? I mean you need protection, round-the-clock police presence, possibly relocation to a safe house. Mrs. Hayes, I'm not trying to scare you, but I need you to take this threat seriously. These people have killed witnesses before. The room felt like it was closing in. First Richard wanted me dead. Then Emma. Now Russian mobsters. How many people wanted me dead? What about Lily and Sophie? Daniel asked. If Maggie's in danger, they might be too. We're working on protection for them as well, Detective Reeves said. But honestly, the best protection is getting Richard and Emma convicted quickly and publicly. Once they're sentenced, once the Novak family sees that we've dismantled this whole operation, the threat level decreases significantly. So I just have to survive the next 2 years, I said bitterly. Hide in a safe house, live in fear, testify against my own husband, and hope the Russian mob doesn't decide I'm worth killing. Mrs. Hayes. No, let me finish. I stood up, anger flooding through me hot and righteous. My son is dead. My husband is a monster. My entire life was a lie. And now you're telling me I have to hide like a criminal while the actual criminals get lawyers and bail and due process? I understand your frustration. You don't understand anything. The words exploded out of me. You didn't watch your child's coffin being carried out of a church while his killers watched. You didn't discover that the man you slept beside for 43 years was planning your murder. You didn't find out you were married to someone connected to the Russian mob. Detective Morrison let me vent, his expression patient. When I finally ran out of steam and collapsed back into my chair, he spoke quietly. You're right, I don't understand what you're going through. Nobody could unless they've lived it. But Mrs. Hayes, I've been a cop for 22 years. I've seen hundreds of cases like this, well, not exactly like this, but close enough. And I've learned that the victims who survive, who thrive, who eventually rebuild their lives, they're the ones who channel their rage into action. They testify, they fight. They refuse to let the people who hurt them win. And the ones who don't survive? I asked quietly. They give up. They let the fear consume them. They hide and wait for death instead of fighting for life. He leaned forward, his gaze intense. Mrs. Hayes, which one are you going to be? I thought about Thomas. About the voice message Lily had played for me, where my son had said he was scared but determined to expose the truth. He'd known he was in danger, but he'd fought anyway. He'd documented everything, hired an investigator, gathered evidence even knowing it might get him killed. My son had been brave when it mattered most. Could I be any less? I'll be the one who fights, I said. I'll testify. I'll do whatever it takes. But I need something from you. Name it. I need you to find Justin Crawford. I need you to get Viktor Fedorov. I need every single person who helped kill my son to pay. Not just Richard and Emma. Everyone. Detective Morrison nodded slowly. That's a tall order, Mrs. Hayes. But I'll do everything in my power to make it happen. You have my word. And I need something else. I looked at Daniel, then back at Morrison. I need to see Richard. One last time. Face to face. I need to tell him exactly what I think of him before he spends the rest of his life in prison. Mrs. Hayes, that's not advisable. You have a restraining order. I don't care. He's had 43 years to tell me lies. I want 5 minutes to tell him the truth. Detective Reeves spoke up. It could be arranged. A controlled environment, police presence, no physical contact. We sometimes allow victim impact statements before sentencing. We could do something similar now, informally, if Richard agrees to it. Why would he agree? I asked. Because his lawyers will think it's an opportunity to show remorse, to humanize him for a jury. They'll think a face-to-face meeting makes him look sympathetic, willing to confront his victim, take responsibility. She smiled grimly. What they won't anticipate is how devastating it'll be when you tell the truth about what he did to you and Thomas. We can record it, use it as evidence of impact. It actually helps our case. I looked at Daniel. What do you think? I think you're the bravest woman I've ever known, he said, and if you want to look that bastard in the eye and tell him what he's cost you, I'll be right there beside you. Then set it up, I told Detective Morrison. I want to see my husband, and I want him to know that he didn't break me. He destroyed everything I loved, but he didn't destroy me. I'll make it happen, Morrison promised. But Mrs. Hayes, be prepared. Richard will try to manipulate you one last time. He'll apologize, make excuses, try to make you feel guilty or confused. Don't let him. I won't, I said. I spent 43 years falling for his lies. That woman died on Christmas Day. The woman sitting here now knows exactly who Richard Hayes is. And she's done being his victim. As we left the police station, snow was still falling, covering the city in white that would turn to gray slush by morning. Nothing stayed pure in this city. Everything eventually showed its dirt. But I was done hiding dirt. Done pretending. Done being the good wife who looked the other way. I was going to war. And Richard Hayes was about to learn that hell hath no fury like a mother whose child has been murdered. The meeting was scheduled for December 28th, 2 days after my visit to the police station. Detective Morrison arranged it in an interrogation room at the courthouse neutral territory, he called it. Richard's lawyers had agreed, probably thinking exactly what Detective Reeves had predicted, that a remorseful face-to-face conversation would make their client look sympathetic. They had no idea what was coming. I spent those 2 days preparing. Not physically, there was no way to prepare for seeing the man who'd murdered your son, but mentally. I wrote down everything I wanted to say, every question I needed answered, every piece of truth I needed to speak. Daniel read my notes and suggested I skip the questions. "He'll just lie," Daniel said. "Don't give him the opportunity. You talk, he listens. That's how this works." "What if I can't do it?" I asked. "What if I see him and I just break down?" "Then you break down," Lily said. She and Sophie had barely left the apartment since Christmas, too scared to go home to their own place. "There's no shame in showing emotion, Margaret. You're human. You're allowed to hurt." But I didn't want to hurt in front of Richard. I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of seeing how much damage he'd caused. I wanted to be ice. Cold, hard, unbreakable ice. On the morning of the 28th, I dressed carefully. Black slacks, a cream sweater, my gray wool coat. Simple. Dignified. The kind of outfit I'd worn to faculty meetings for 30 years, armor disguised as respectability. Daniel drove me to the courthouse. Detective Morrison met us at a side entrance, away from reporters who'd somehow learned about the meeting and were camped outside the main doors. "Are you ready for this?" Morrison asked as we took the elevator to the 3rd floor. "No," I said honestly, "but I'm doing it anyway." The interrogation room was exactly as I'd imagined, from crime shows, beige walls, a metal table, uncomfortable chairs, a mirror that was obviously two-way glass. 2 uniformed officers stood against the back wall. Detective Morrison positioned himself near the door. "He'll be brought in through that door," Morrison said, pointing. "He'll be in handcuffs and leg shackles. That's protocol for inmates out of custody. His lawyers will be with him." "You don't have to acknowledge them." "How long do I have?" "As long as you need. If at any point you want to leave, just stand up and walk out. No explanations necessary." Daniel squeezed my shoulder. "I'll be right outside. If you need me, I'm here." "I know." Then I was alone in the room with 2 silent officers and Detective Morrison. The seconds ticked by like hours. I stared at my reflection in the two-way mirror, a 77-year-old woman who looked every day of her age. Grief had carved new lines into my face. Fear had shadowed my eyes. But there was something else there too, something I hadn't seen before. Strength. Hard won and dearly bought, but real. The door opened. Richard shuffled in, wearing an orange jumpsuit that seemed obscene against his usual expensive suits. His hands were cuffed in front of him, connected by a chain to the shackles on his ankles. He'd lost weight in the 3 days since his arrest. His silver hair was uncombed. He looked diminished, smaller somehow, as if prison had already begun shrinking him down to his true size. Our eyes met, and I felt nothing. No love, no hate, no pain. Just a vast, empty indifference, like looking at a stranger who happened to share my last name. His lawyers entered behind him, Marcus Bradford, the man who'd confronted me outside the bank, and a woman I didn't recognize. They wore matching expressions of professional sympathy. "Mrs. Hayes," Bradford began, "thank you for agreeing to this meeting. My client wanted an opportunity to speak with you, to express his—" "No," I cut him off. "Your client doesn't speak. I speak. He listens. Those are the terms. If you don't like them, leave." Bradford exchanged glances with his colleague. "Mrs. Hayes, we agreed to this meeting with the understanding that it would be a dialogue." "You agreed to my terms," Detective Morrison interjected from his position by the door. "Mrs. Hayes speaks. Mr. Hayes listens. That's the arrangement. If you'd like to renegotiate, we can reschedule for 6 months from now." The lawyers conferred in whispers. Finally, Bradford nodded. "Agreed. But we reserve the right to end the meeting if Mrs. Hayes becomes threatening or hostile." "I'm not going to threaten him," I said. "I'm simply going to tell the truth." They guided Richard to the chair across from me. The chain connecting his handcuffs rattled as he sat down. Up close, I could see the stubble on his face, the yellowing bruise on his cheek, some altercation in lockup probably. The great Richard Hayes, beaten up by his fellow inmates. There was a certain justice in that. "Margaret," he said, his voice hoarse, "please, let me." I said no talking. My voice was ice. "You had 43 years to talk. You used that time to lie. Now you listen." His mouth closed. Something flickered in his eyes, anger maybe, or frustration. He wasn't used to being silenced, especially not by me. I pulled out the notes I'd written, smoothed them on the table, then looked directly at him. I want you to know what you took from me, I began. Not just Thomas, not just my money or my home or my sense of security. I want you to understand the full scope of the destruction you caused. Richard started to speak, but Bradford put a hand on his arm. He subsided, jaw clenched. You took my son, the boy I carried for 9 months, the baby I nursed through colic and fever, the child I walked to kindergarten, taught to read, helped with homework, the teenager I worried about and the young man I was so proud of. You took Thomas from me, and you did it for money. $5 million in insurance. That's what my son's life was worth to you. $5 million. My voice was steady, each word clear and precise. I'd practiced this. But Thomas wasn't just my son. He was Sophie's father. You robbed an 8-year-old girl of the chance to know her daddy. She'll grow up without him. Every birthday, every graduation, every important moment of her life, he won't be there. Because you cut his brake lines and watched him drive to his death. Richard's face had gone pale. His lawyers were scribbling notes, probably cataloging every statement I made to use against me later. I didn't care. You took my marriage. 43 years I gave you. My youth, my trust, my love. I believed you when you said you'd honor and cherish me. I believed you were a good man. Do you know how that feels, Richard? To discover that the foundation of your entire adult life was built on lies? I leaned forward slightly. You made me doubt my own judgment, my own sanity. Every time I felt something was wrong, you told me I was being paranoid, emotional, hysterical. You gaslit me for years, making me think I was the problem when you were the monster all along. Margaret, I never meant to hurt you, Richard said, his voice breaking. You have to believe. I said, don't speak. The words came out sharp, loud. One of the officers shifted slightly. You don't get to play victim here. You don't get to tell me what you meant or didn't mean. Your intentions don't matter. Your actions matter. And your actions killed our son. Tears were running down Richard's face now. Probably rehearsed. Probably calculated to make him look remorseful. But I knew better. You took my money, my retirement that I earned through 32 years of teaching, Robert's life insurance that was supposed to be my security. You stole $177,000 from me. You laundered money through my accounts, making me an unwitting accomplice in your crimes. You used me as a shield, hiding behind our marriage while you destroyed everything we'd built. I pulled out one of Marcus Chen's photos, Richard and Emma kissing outside the hotel, and slid it across the table. You took my dignity. You had an affair with our son's wife, our daughter-in-law, the woman who called me like a second mother. You betrayed Thomas in the worst possible way, and then you killed him when he threatened to expose you. Richard was openly sobbing now, his body shaking. I'm sorry, he choked out. God forgive me, I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't bring Thomas back, I said flatly. Sorry doesn't undo the 43 years of lies. Sorry doesn't give Sophie her father back. Sorry is just a word you're using because your lawyers told you remorse might get you a lighter sentence. I stood up, placing both hands flat on the table. But here's what you didn't take, Richard. You didn't take my strength. You didn't break my spirit. You tried to destroy me, but I'm still here. I'm going to testify at your trial. I'm going to tell the jury everything, and I'm going to watch you get sentenced to life in prison, knowing you'll die there, alone, forgotten. A cautionary tale about what happens when greed destroys a soul. Richard looked up at me, his face a mask of anguish. Please, please, Margaret. I loved you. I still love you. This was all Emma's idea. She manipulated me, threatened me. Stop lying, I said quietly. You bought the hacksaw blades. You stole Thomas's car from the mechanic. You met with Victor Fedorov to launder money. You planned my murder with Emma and Justin Crawford. Those are facts, Richard. Documented facts. And no amount of tears or apologies will change them. I gathered my notes and turned toward the door. But before I left, I had one final thing to say. You know what the saddest part is? If you'd just been honest. If you'd just come to me 10 years ago, or 5 years ago, or even last year and said, Margaret, I'm not happy, I want a divorce. I would have been hurt. I would have cried. But I would have survived. We could have ended our marriage with dignity, split our assets fairly, remained civil for Thomas's sake. Instead, you chose murder. You chose evil. And now you'll pay the price. Margaret, wait. But I was already walking out, Detective Morrison holding the door open for me. As it closed behind me, I heard Richard's voice, plaintive and desperate. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. In the hallway, Daniel was waiting. He pulled me into a hug, and I stood there in his arms, shaking but not crying. I'd said what I needed to say. I'd looked evil in the face and hadn't flinched. You did great, Maggie, Daniel murmured. Thomas would be so proud of you. I hope so, I whispered. God, I hope so. Detective Morrison emerged from the room. That was powerful, Mrs. Hayes. We recorded everything. The jury is going to hear exactly what Richard's crimes cost you. This is going to be devastating for his defense. Good, I said. Let them hear it. Let everyone hear it. As we left the courthouse through the side entrance, avoiding the reporters, I felt something shift inside me. A weight I'd been carrying since Christmas morning, the weight of uncertainty, of fear, of wondering if I was strong enough to face Richard, lifted slightly. I was strong enough. I'd just proven it. And I would keep proving it, every day, until Richard Hayes was behind bars for the rest of his miserable life. The war wasn't over, but I'd just won a crucial battle. And I wasn't stopping until I'd won them all. The next morning I woke to discover my face plastered across every news channel in Boston. Someone had leaked video of my confrontation with Richard, not the official police recording, but cell phone footage from outside the interrogation room. The audio was muffled, but clear enough to make out my words. You killed our son for $5 million. By noon, the story had gone national. Boston professor confronts husband who murdered their son. Christmas Day funeral turns into murder confession. Elderly woman faces down killer husband. You didn't break me. The headlines were everywhere. My photo, a professional headshot from my Boston University faculty page, appeared next to Richard's mugshot on every major news website. Cable news shows were discussing the case. Legal analysts were debating whether Richard's public crying would help or hurt his defense. Crime podcasters were already planning episodes. I'd become a symbol. A viral moment. The grieving mother who'd stood up to evil and refused to be silent. This is what you wanted, right? Lily asked gently as I scrolled through my phone, watching my life become entertainment for millions of strangers. Publicity means pressure. It means Richard's lawyers can't make quiet deals. It means the whole world is watching. I know, I said, but I didn't expect this. My phone had been ringing constantly since 6 a.m., reporters requesting interviews, producers from morning shows offering exclusive sit-downs, a literary agent wanting to discuss a book deal about my experience, even a filmmaker asking about movie rights. Don't answer any of them, Judith Chen advised when I called her in a panic. Not yet. Let the story simmer. Every interview you give now could be used against you in court. Richard's lawyers will parse every word, looking for inconsistencies. Wait until after the trial. But people are saying things online, I protested. They're making assumptions about me, about Thomas, about... Let them, Judith said firmly. The court of public opinion doesn't matter. The actual court is what counts. Stay silent, stay dignified, and let the evidence speak for itself. It was good advice. But it was torture to watch strangers dissect my life, my marriage, my son's death, as if it were a puzzle for their amusement. Some of the online comments were supportive. This woman is a hero for standing up to her abuser, praying for Margaret Hayes and her family. Justice for Thomas. But others were cruel. She must have known what her husband was like. Why did she stay so long? Probably in it for the insurance money herself, fake crying for the cameras. She wants attention. Stop reading those, Daniel said, taking my phone away. Those people don't know you. They don't know what you've been through. Don't let strangers' opinions define you. He was right. But the scrutiny felt like being flayed alive, every private moment of grief and trauma exposed for public consumption. Sophie, bless her heart, was my anchor. She didn't understand the media circus, didn't grasp why strangers cared about our family. To her, I was just Grandma Margaret who made her hot chocolate and read her bedtime stories and promised her everything would be okay. Are you famous now? She asked one morning, watching a news segment that featured my photo. I guess so, I said. But not the good kind of famous. Not like a movie star or a singer. Why not? Because I'm famous for something sad. For losing your daddy. Sophie thought about this for a moment. Daddy told me that when bad things happen, we have to be brave. Are you being brave, Grandma Margaret? I'm trying to be. Then that's the good kind of famous, she said with the simple wisdom of childhood. Being brave when you're sad. Out of the mouths of babes. On December 30th, 3 days after my confrontation with Richard, Detective Morrison called with news. Mrs. Hayes, we've arrested Dr. Leonard Morrison, the cardiologist who'd allegedly falsified Thomas's medical records for the insurance policy. What's he being charged with? Insurance fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, and falsifying medical documents. We executed a search warrant on his office and found records of at least 40 other patients whose files he'd altered for various insurance schemes. This guy has been running a fraud operation for years. Will he testify against Richard? His lawyer is already discussing a plea deal. If Dr. Morrison testifies about Richard paying him $50,000 to fake Thomas's health records, it's additional evidence of premeditation. It shows Richard was planning the insurance fraud months before the actual murder. More evidence. More proof of Richard's guilt piling up like snow in a Boston winter. There's more, Morrison continued. We tracked down Viktor Fedorov, the Russian mob connection. The FBI raided his operation in Brighton Beach yesterday. They found financial records linking him to Richard's offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. Fedorov is facing 40 years federal time for money laundering and racketeering. Will he testify too? Probably not. Men like Fedorov don't cooperate with law enforcement. But we don't need his testimony. We have the financial records. That's enough to prove Richard was laundering money through organized crime channels. I should have felt victorious. Each new arrest, each new piece of evidence was another nail in Richard's coffin, but all I felt was tired. Bone-deep, soul-crushing exhaustion. What about Justin Crawford? I asked. Emma's ex-boyfriend who fled to Brazil? Still hunting for him. Brazilian authorities are cooperating, but Sao Paulo is a big city. He could be hiding anywhere. However, we did find something interesting when we searched Emma's apartment. What? A burner phone. Untraceable. Bought with cash, used exclusively to communicate with Crawford. The text messages on it are illuminating. Can I hear them? Morrison paused. Mrs. Hayes, they're pretty disturbing. Are you sure you want? I'm sure. He read several messages, his voice carefully neutral. J. When are we doing this? I'm tired of waiting. E. Soon. Richard says, after the new year. Make it look like a car accident. J. And the old lady? E. Different method. Pills, maybe. She takes sleeping medication. Easy to make it look like suicide from grief. J. How much is my cut again? E. $2 million from Thomas's insurance. Another $1 million when Margaret dies and Richard inherits. J. That's it? Richard gets $4 million and I only get $3 million? E. Richard is taking all the risk. He's the one with access to everything. You're just the backup plan. J. Whatever, as long as I get paid. The casual callousness of it was breathtaking. They discussed murdering Thomas and me like they were negotiating a business contract. No emotion, no hesitation, just cold calculation about money and methods. There's one more message, Morrison said quietly, from Emma to Crawford, sent on December 24th, Christmas Eve, the night before your son's funeral. He read, Tomorrow we play the grieving widow and heartbroken father-in-law. Then after Margaret signs over her power of attorney, we finish this. 1 more year and we're done. $3 million richer and free to be together. I had to put the phone down. My hands were shaking too violently to hold it. They'd been planning to manipulate me into signing a power of attorney, probably by claiming I was too grief-stricken to manage my own affairs. Then they'd have controlled all my assets. And then they'd have killed me. Mrs. Hayes, are you still there? I picked up the phone. I'm here. Detective, that message Emma sent at Christmas Eve. That means they were planning to kill me within days. If Lily hadn't shown up at the funeral with evidence, if I hadn't confronted them publicly, you'd probably be dead right now, Morrison said bluntly. Your public exposure of their crimes is likely what saved your life. They couldn't make you disappear once the whole world knew about the murder plot. So my survival had been luck. Timing. Lily's bravery in coming forward. Thomas's foresight in documenting everything. A chain of small decisions that had kept me alive, when by all rights I should have been the second victim. The burner phone messages will be key evidence at trial, Morrison continued. They show Emma and Crawford actively planning your murder. Combined with Emma's confession at the church and Richard's video buying the hacksaw blades, the prosecution has an airtight case. When does the trial start? Preliminary hearing is scheduled for February 15th. That's when the judge will decide if there's enough evidence to proceed to trial. Given what we have, it's a formality. The actual trial probably won't start until next fall, September or October at the earliest. 10 more months of waiting, 10 more months of living in fear, looking over my shoulder, wondering if Justin Crawford would return from Brazil or if Viktor Fedorov's associates would decide I was too dangerous to leave alive. I don't know if I can do this for 10 more months, I admitted. You can, Morrison said with certainty. You've survived the worst of it already. Everything from here is just paperwork and procedure. The hard part, gathering evidence, exposing the conspiracy, confronting your husband, you've already done that. Now you just need to endure. Endure. Such a small word for such a monumental task. That evening, as I helped Sophie with a jigsaw puzzle at Daniel's kitchen table, my phone rang, unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Mrs. Hayes? An unfamiliar woman's voice, young and nervous. My name is Jennifer Crawford. I'm Justin Crawford's sister. My blood went cold. I have nothing to say to. Please don't hang up. The desperation in her voice stopped me. I need to talk to you about my brother, about what he did. Please. I should have hung up. I should have called Detective Morrison immediately. Instead, I found myself saying, I'm listening. My brother is a bad person, Jennifer said, her words tumbling out in a rush. I know that. He's always been bad, stealing, lying, hurting people. But Mrs. Hayes, I didn't know about the murder plot. I swear I didn't know. I just found out from the news, and I've been sick about it ever since. Why are you calling me? Because I know where he is. Justin is in Sao Paulo, but he's planning to move to Argentina next week. He thinks he'll be safer there, harder to find. But Mrs. Hayes, I can't let him get away with helping kill your son. I can't live with that, so I'm telling you where he is. She gave me an address, a neighborhood in Sao Paulo, a specific apartment building, even a unit number. How do you know all this? I asked suspiciously. He called me yesterday, bragging about how he'd pulled off the perfect crime and was going to live like a king in South America on his share of the money. He's my brother, but he's also a monster. And monsters need to be stopped. Have you told the police? I'm calling them next. But I wanted to tell you first. You deserve to know. You deserve to have every single person who hurt your son brought to justice. After she hung up, I sat staring at the phone. Then I called Detective Morrison and relayed everything Jennifer Crawford had told me. I'll contact the FBI immediately, he said. If we can get Crawford's exact location, Brazilian authorities might be willing to grab him. This could be the break we needed. Do you think she's telling the truth? I think she feels guilty about her brother's crimes, and she's trying to make amends. Whether that translates to accurate information, we'll find out. I hung up and returned to Sophie's puzzle. She'd completed the border and was working on the interior, a picture of a beach at sunset, all warm oranges and soft blues. Is this what heaven looks like? Sophie asked suddenly. I don't know, sweetheart. Why? If this scene touched your heart, tap like to let me know it resonated with you. Do you see a glimpse of your own story in theirs? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Because I think Daddy is at the beach in heaven. He always wanted to take me to the beach, but he never did. So maybe he's there now, waiting for when I can visit him someday. I pulled her into my lap, this wise little girl with her father's eyes and her resilient heart. That's a beautiful thought. I bet you're exactly right. Will the bad people go to heaven too? No, baby. The bad people are going somewhere very different. Good, Sophie said with satisfaction. They don't deserve beaches. Out of the mouths of babes. The innocent clarity of a child's sense of justice. If only the adult world were so simple. Jennifer Crawford's information proved accurate. On January 2nd, Brazilian federal police raided the Sao Paulo apartment she'd identified and found Justin Crawford packing to flee to Argentina. He was arrested and held pending extradition hearings. Detective Morrison called me with the news, his voice carrying a note of satisfaction I hadn't heard before. We got him, Mrs. Hayes. Crawford is in custody. The Brazilian authorities are cooperating fully because of the organized crime connections they want. Viktor Fedorov's operation dismantled as much as we do. Crawford will be extradited within 60 days. Will he fight it? His lawyer is already talking plea bargain. Crawford knows we have the burner phone messages, knows we have testimony from Marcus Chen about his meetings with Richard and Emma, knows his own sister turned him in. He's looking at life without parole. If he cooperates, testifies against Richard and Emma, he might get it reduced to 25 or 30 years. 25 years. Justin Crawford would be in his 50s when he got out if he got out. It wasn't enough punishment for helping murder my son, but it was something. What about Emma? I asked. Have her lawyers been in touch? Actually, yes. That's the other reason I'm calling. Morrison paused. Emma wants to make a deal too. She's willing to testify against Richard in exchange for a reduced sentence. The words hit me like ice water. She wants to betray him? After everything they did together? Rats fleeing a sinking ship, Mrs. Hayes. It's textbook behavior. Emma sees that the evidence against her is overwhelming. She knows about the videos, the text messages, the witness statements. She's 25 years old and looking at life in prison. Her lawyer is arguing she was manipulated by an older, more powerful man that Richard groomed her, controlled her, forced her into the plot. That's garbage, I spat. The messages show she was an equal partner. She was planning my murder. She talked about it casually, like ordering takeout. I agree, but here's the thing. If Emma testifies, she can provide details about Richard's planning that we don't have other ways to prove. She can testify about conversations, about his state of mind, about how he researched ways to cut brake lines. Her testimony would make our case absolutely bulletproof. At what cost? What kind of deal is she asking for? 20 years with possibility of parole after 15. She'd be 40 years old when released. That's obscene. She helped kill my son. She was going to kill me. And she gets out in 15 years? I understand your anger, Mrs. Hayes. Believe me, I do. But we have to think strategically. With Emma's testimony, Richard has zero chance of acquittal. Without it, there's always a slim possibility his expensive lawyers find a way to create reasonable doubt. Do we want to risk that? I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something. The idea of Emma getting a reduced sentence, of potentially walking free while she was still young enough to rebuild a life, was nauseating. What does the district attorney say? I asked. He wants to take it. He thinks Emma's testimony is worth the deal. But Mrs. Hayes, you're the victim's family. Your opinion matters. If you're strongly opposed, we can turn down the deal and take our chances at trial. I closed my eyes, thinking of Thomas. What would he want? Justice? Revenge? Certainty that his killers would be convicted? Take the deal, I said finally, the words tasting like poison. But I want conditions. What conditions? Emma doesn't get to attend Thomas's burial when we finally have it. She doesn't get to send letters or cards to me or Sophie. She serves her full 15 years minimum. No early release for good behavior, and she has to publicly admit her guilt in open court and detail everything she did. Allocution is standard for plea deals. The rest I'll push for it. I can't guarantee the DA will agree to all of it, but I'll try. After I hung up, I sat in Daniel's living room feeling hollowed out. Lily was at work. Sophie was at school. Daniel was running errands. I was alone with my thoughts, and they were dark. Emma would get out of prison someday. She'd be 40 years old, still young enough to start over. She could change her name, move to a different state, reinvent herself. She'd have a future. Thomas would never have a future. He was 26 years old forever, frozen in time, buried in a plot we still hadn't been able to properly memorialize because his body had been held as evidence. The unfairness of it was crushing. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You think you've won. You haven't. This isn't over. My hands started shaking. Was this Richard? How did he have access to a phone? Inmates weren't supposed to have cell phones. I called Detective Morrison immediately. I just got a threatening text. What did it say? I read it to him. Forward it to me right now. We'll trace the number. Mrs. Hayes, don't respond to it. Don't engage. It's probably someone trying to intimidate you. It's working, I said. I'm terrified. I know. But remember, Richard is in maximum security detention. He has limited access to phones, and all his calls are monitored. If he sent that message, we'll know. And if someone else sent it on his behalf, that's witness tampering. We'll prosecute them too. But the damage was done. For the rest of the day, every time my phone buzzed, I jumped. Every notification felt like a threat. I thought I was safe with Richard and Emma in custody, but clearly, I wasn't. They still had reach. They could still hurt me. That evening, Judith Chen called with more bad news. Margaret, Richard's law firm filed for bankruptcy this morning. What? Why? Because once news broke about Richard's embezzlement, all his former clients started demanding audits. The firm discovered he'd stolen nearly $2 million from various client escrow accounts over the past 3 years. They don't have the reserves to cover those losses. They're declaring bankruptcy and closing. $2 million. The number was so staggering I couldn't process it. What does this mean for me? I asked. It means recovering your stolen money just got much harder. I was hoping to negotiate a settlement with the firm. They'd repay what Richard stole from you in exchange for you not suing them for negligent supervision. But if they're bankrupt, there's nothing to recover. Their assets will be liquidated to pay creditors, and you'll be in line with everyone else Richard victimized. So I might get nothing back? You'll get something, but probably pennies on the dollar. Maybe 20 or 30,000 out of the 177,000 he stole from you. I felt like I was drowning. Not only had Richard killed my son and destroyed my life, he'd ruined me financially. At 77 years old, I'd have to rebuild from nothing. My retirement was gone. My security was gone. My future was gone. There's one other option, Judith said carefully. We could sue Richard's parents. His parents? They're both dead. They died years ago. I know. But Richard inherited their estate about $800,000 in total. That money is technically separate from his criminal assets. We could argue that since Richard used his inheritance to fund his criminal activities, it should be seized as proceeds of crime. Would that work? Maybe. It's a long shot, but at this point, we need to explore every avenue for financial recovery. $800,000 that had belonged to Richard's parents, decent people who'd worked hard their whole lives and never knew their son was a monster. Seizing their legacy felt wrong somehow. But I was desperate. Do it, I said. File whatever paperwork you need to file. I can't survive on $30,000. I'll start the process tomorrow. But Margaret, I need to prepare you. This could take years to resolve. Bankruptcy proceedings are slow. Asset seizures are complicated. You might not see any recovered funds for 2 or 3 years. 2 or 3 more years of poverty, of uncertainty, of struggling to make ends meet while Richard's victims, including me, fought over the scraps of his ruined empire. I don't know how to do this, I whispered. I don't know how to be poor at 77. I've never not had security. Even when Robert and I were young and struggling, we had each other. We had hope. What do I have now? You have Daniel. You have Lily and Sophie. You have people who love you. Love doesn't pay rent, Judith. No, but it keeps you alive when money can't. Her voice was gentle. Margaret, I've worked with a lot of victims over the years. The ones who survive aren't the ones with the most money. They're the ones with the most support. You're not alone. Remember that. After we hung up, I sat in the gathering darkness of Daniel's apartment, too tired to even turn on a light. My phone buzzed again, another unknown number. I almost didn't answer, scared it would be another threat. But something made me pick up. Mrs. Hayes? A young woman's voice, professional and kind. My name is Dr. Rebecca Walsh. I'm a therapist specializing in trauma and PTSD. Detective Morrison gave me your number and suggested I reach out. I offer free counseling to crime victims. I don't need therapy, I said automatically. Mrs. Hayes, you've suffered multiple traumas in a very short period. Your son was murdered. You discovered your husband was his killer. You were attacked in your own home. You learned your entire marriage was a lie. Those are all legitimate reasons to seek support. I'm fine. Are you sleeping? I paused. No. Are you eating regular meals? Not really. Are you having intrusive thoughts? Flashbacks? Panic attacks? All of the above. Every night I jolted awake from nightmares where Richard was chasing me with a knife. Every meal tasted like ashes. Every time a car backfired, I thought someone was shooting at me. Maybe I'm not fine, I admitted. That's okay. That's normal. What you're experiencing is a natural response to extreme trauma. Mrs. Hayes, I'd like to offer you some sessions. No charge. Just someone safe to talk to who understands what you're going through. Why would you do that for free? Because 20 years ago my sister was murdered by her husband. I watched my family fall apart from grief and trauma. I became a therapist so I could help other people survive what we went through. Let me help you, Mrs. Hayes, please. Something in her voice, the genuine compassion, the understanding born of shared pain, broke through my defenses. Okay, I said. When can we start? How about tomorrow? I have an opening at 10 a.m. I can come to you if traveling to an office is too difficult. That would be good. Thank you, Dr. Walsh. Call me Rebecca. And Mrs. Hayes, you're stronger than you know. You're going to survive this. I promise. After she hung up, I finally turned on the lights. Daniel would be home soon with groceries. Lily and Sophie would return from their day. Life would continue its relentless forward march whether I was ready or not. But maybe, just maybe, I didn't have to march alone. Maybe accepting help wasn't weakness. Maybe admitting I was broken wasn't giving up. Maybe healing was possible, even in the wreckage of everything I'd lost. Outside, snow was falling again. It had been snowing on and off since Christmas Day, covering Boston in layer after layer of white. But eventually, spring would come. The snow would melt. Things buried all winter would emerge into the light. I had to believe the same was true for me. That eventually, I'd emerge from this frozen hell into something resembling life. I had to believe it, because the alternative was giving up, and I'd promised Thomas I would never, ever give up. It took 6 weeks, but on February 10th, we were finally given permission to bury Thomas. The medical examiner had completed all necessary examinations. The evidence had been catalogued. My son's body was released to us at last. This time, there would be no spectacle. No 200 guests. No reporters. No drama. Just family. Daniel helped me arrange everything. We chose Mount Auburn Cemetery in Cambridge, a beautiful, historic burial ground with rolling hills and ancient trees. Robert was buried there, and I'd always planned to join him someday. Now Thomas would rest beside his father. The funeral director, Mr. Chen, no relation to Marcus, the investigator was patient and kind as we made arrangements. How many people will be attending? He asked. 5, I said. Myself, my brother Daniel, Lily Carter, and her daughter Sophie, and, I hesitated. Thomas's biological father should be informed, though I doubt he'll come. Lily looked at me sharply. Thomas's biological father? I thought Richard was. A secret I've kept for 27 years, I said quietly. Thomas was conceived during a brief separation Richard and I had in our marriage. I had an affair with a colleague from the university. When I discovered I was pregnant, Richard and I reconciled. He agreed to raise Thomas as his own. The biological father never knew. Daniel was staring at me. Maggie, you never told me this. I never told anyone. It was my shame, my secret. But now, I took a shaky breath. Now I think Thomas's biological father deserves to know what happened to his son. Even if he didn't know Thomas existed. Who is he? Lily asked. Dr. James Morrison. He's a literature professor at Northeastern now. We haven't spoken in 26 years. That evening I called him. The conversation was awkward, painful, surreal. Margaret? Is that really you? James's voice, older but still familiar, carried across the phone line. Yes. James, I need to tell you something. 27 years ago, when we were together, I got pregnant. Silence. Then, what? I had a son. I named him Thomas. I let Richard raise him as his own, and I never told you because I was ashamed and scared and I thought it was for the best. But James, Thomas died. He was murdered. And before I bury him, I wanted you to know that you had a son. More silence. When James finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. You had my child? For 26 years I had a son and you never told me? I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I made a terrible choice and I've lived with the guilt every day since. But James, he was wonderful. Smart, kind, passionate about the environment. He became an engineer. He had a daughter, your granddaughter. Her name is Sophie. How did he die? Richard killed him. Cut the brake lines on his car for insurance money. The trial is in a few months. James made a sound like he'd been punched. My God. Margaret, I don't. I don't know what to say. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm just asking if you want to attend his burial. It's on February 10th at 2 p.m. at Mount Auburn Cemetery. You're his father. You have a right to be there. I'll be there, James said immediately. And Margaret? After the funeral, I want to meet Sophie. I want to know my granddaughter. I'll arrange it. When I told Lily about the conversation, she looked stunned. So Richard raised a son who wasn't biologically his, and then killed him anyway? Makes it even more monstrous, doesn't it? Daniel said. He could have just walked away, just left, but instead, he murdered a young man who wasn't even his blood. Sophie, listening from her spot at the kitchen table, spoke up. Does this mean I have another grandpa? Yes, sweetheart, I said. His name is James. He's a professor like I was. He didn't know about your daddy until now, but he wants to meet you. Is he nice? He's very nice. He loved to read just like your daddy did. They would have been friends if they'd had the chance to know each other. Sophie considered this. Okay, I'll meet him, but he has to promise not to be bad like the other grandpa. I promise you he's nothing like Richard. February 10th dawned cold and clear. The kind of winter day that makes your breath visible and your fingers numb, but the sun shines so bright off the snow that you need sunglasses. We gathered at the cemetery at 1:30 early to have private time before the service. Thomas's casket was already at the gravesite, covered with a spray of white lilies. Simple, dignified. The way Thomas would have wanted it. James arrived at 1:45, looking nervous and grief-stricken. He was 62 now, his dark hair threaded with silver, his face lined with the years I'd stolen from him. When he saw me, something complicated passed across his features. Anger, sorrow, regret. James, I said. Thank you for coming. Margaret. He looked past me to the casket. That's him? That's our son? Yes. James walked to the casket slowly, as if approaching something holy. He placed both hands on the polished wood, and his shoulders shook with silent sobs. Lily stood beside me, Sophie's hand in hers. Should we give him some privacy? She whispered. Yes. We moved away, giving James time to grieve the son he'd never known. Daniel put his arm around my shoulders. You did the right thing, he murmured. Telling him. He deserved to know. I should have told him 27 years ago. Probably, but you can't change the past. You can only try to make the present better. At 2 o'clock, Reverend Patterson arrived, the same minister who'd been officiating when everything exploded at Old North Church. He'd agreed to conduct this private service, saying he felt obligated to give Thomas a proper send-off after the disaster of the first attempt. We stood in a small circle around the grave, 6 people, me, Daniel, Lily, Sophie, James, and Reverend Patterson. That was all. No crowds, no cameras, no chaos. Just the people who truly loved Thomas, or had reason to. Reverend Patterson's words were simple and honest. He spoke of Thomas's life, his passions, his kindness. He acknowledged the circumstances of his death without dwelling on them. He offered prayers for comfort and healing. Then he invited anyone who wanted to speak to share memories. James went first. His voice shook as he spoke. I never knew Thomas. That's my greatest regret. But Margaret told me he loved literature, like I do, that he cared about making the world better, that he was a good father to Sophie, even if he struggled with fear. Those are things I understand. I wish his voice broke. I wish I'd had the chance to tell him I was proud of him, that I would have loved him, that he mattered. Lily spoke next, sharing memories of Thomas's devotion to Sophie despite his fears. He sent birthday cards every year. He set up a trust fund for her education. He called every Christmas Eve just to hear her voice. He was trying to be a father in the only way he knew how. Sophie stepped forward, clutching a piece of paper. I wrote a letter to my daddy. Can I read it? Of course, sweetheart, I said. Her young voice, clear and strong, carried across the cemetery. Dear Daddy, I know you're in heaven now. Grandma Margaret says you're probably at the beach because that's where you always wanted to take me. I'm sorry we never got to go to the beach together when you were alive. But maybe when I'm old like Grandma, I'll come to the beach in heaven and we can finally build sand castles. I love you, Daddy. Love, Sophie. There wasn't a dry eye in the circle. When it was my turn to speak, I stepped forward and placed my hand on the casket. Thomas, my beautiful boy, I failed you in so many ways. I didn't protect you from the monster I married. I didn't see the danger until it was too late. But I want you to know I've spent every day since you died fighting for justice. Fighting for you. And I won't stop fighting until every person who hurt you pays for what they did." My voice gained strength. "You deserved so much better than the life you got. Better than a father who murdered you. Better than a mother who was blind. Better than the fear and pain you lived with at the end. But Thomas, you were good. You were brave. You tried to do the right thing even when it was dangerous. And I will spend the rest of my life making sure people remember you for who you really were, a hero who died trying to expose evil." Daniel spoke briefly, sharing memories of watching Thomas grow up. Then Reverend Patterson said final prayers, and the cemetery workers began lowering the casket into the ground. This was it. The moment I'd been dreading and needing in equal measure, the finality of watching my son disappear into the earth. Sophie clutched my hand. "Is Daddy really in that box?" "His body is. But his spirit, the part that made him your daddy, that's free now. That's at peace." "I hope so," Sophie whispered. "I really hope so." We each threw a handful of dirt onto the casket. The sound of earth hitting wood was the loneliest sound I'd ever heard. As the workers filled in the grave, we stood in silence. This small group of people united by love and loss, watching winter sun sparkle off snow, hearing birds sing in nearby trees despite the cold. Life continuing. Even here, in this place of death, life insisted on continuing. After the burial, we gathered at a small restaurant Daniel had reserved, a quiet Italian place with private dining room. James sat beside Sophie, asking her gentle questions about school, her interests, her life. "Do you like to read?" he asked. "I love to read. Grandma Margaret gives me books all the time." "What kind of books?" "Fantasy, mostly. Magic, and dragons, and quests." James smiled a real smile, the first I'd seen from him all day. "Your daddy liked those kinds of books too, I bet." "I do too. Maybe we could visit a bookstore together sometime? I could help you pick out something new?" Sophie looked at Lily, who nodded permission. "Okay, that would be nice." "Sophie," James said carefully, "I know this is confusing. I'm a stranger who claims to be your grandfather. You don't have to call me Grandpa or anything like that, but I'd really like to get to know you, if that's okay." "It's okay," Sophie said. "I asked Grandma Margaret if you were nice, and she said yes, so I believe her." The simple trust of childhood, the assumption that adults could be relied upon to tell the truth and keep children safe. Thomas had tried to preserve that innocence for Sophie by staying away, by not burdening her with his own fears and failures. Now it was our job to preserve it, to give Sophie the stable, loving childhood her father hadn't been able to provide. "James," I said across the table, "I want you to be part of Sophie's life. If you're willing, she needs family, good family, family who will protect and love her." "I'd be honored," James said. His eyes met mine, and in them I saw forgiveness I didn't deserve. "Margaret, what you did keeping Thomas from me, that hurt. It still hurts, but I understand why you did it. And I don't want Sophie to lose another family member because of old grudges, so let's start fresh. For her sake." For her sake, I agreed. As we ate and talked carefully, avoiding topics of murder, trials, and trauma, I felt something shift inside me. A lightening. Not happiness, not yet, but something close to peace. Thomas was buried properly. His daughter had a new grandfather. His biological father finally knew the truth. Justice was slowly grinding forward. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was something. And for today, something was all I needed. Outside the restaurant windows, snow began to fall again. Soft, gentle flakes that drifted down like benedictions from a sky that was finally starting to clear. February 15th arrived with the kind of bitter cold that makes Boston feel like the Arctic. I dressed in layers, a black turtleneck, gray wool pants, my warmest coat, and still felt frozen as Daniel drove us to Suffolk County Superior Court. The preliminary hearing was a formality, Detective Morrison had explained. The judge would review the evidence and decide if there was enough to proceed to trial. Given the mountain of proof against Richard and Emma, the outcome was never in doubt. But I still needed to be there. Needed to see them face the charges officially. Needed to watch justice inch forward. The courthouse was an imposing granite building on Pemberton Square, all columns and authority. Media vans lined the street. Reporters stood in clusters, breath steaming in the cold, waiting for someone to interview or photograph. Head down, keep moving, Daniel instructed as we approached. Don't engage. But they spotted us anyway. Mrs. Hayes, how do you feel about today's hearing? Are you satisfied with the charges? Do you think your husband will plead guilty? Will you attend the trial? I kept my eyes forward and my mouth shut, just as Judith had coached me. Every word I spoke could be twisted, taken out of context, used against me. Silence was safer. Inside, we passed through metal detectors and were directed to courtroom 4A on the 3rd floor. Judith Chen met us in the hallway, briefcase in hand, looking every inch the professional attorney. Margaret, Daniel. Are you ready? As ready as I'll ever be, I said. Good. Remember, this is just a hearing. Richard and Emma will be there, but they won't speak. Their lawyers will make arguments. The prosecutor will present evidence. The judge will rule. You're an observer today, nothing more. Will I have to testify? Not today. At the actual trial, yes, but today you just watch. She led us into the courtroom, a formal space with dark wood paneling, high ceilings, and the seal of Massachusetts mounted behind the judge's bench. The gallery was half full with reporters, court watchers, and a few people I didn't recognize. And there, at the defense table, sat Richard and Emma. They were separated by their attorneys, Richard on the left with Marcus Bradford and his team, Emma on the right with a sharp-featured woman in her 50s. Both defendants wore civilian clothes instead of prison jumpsuits, probably a tactic to make them look more sympathetic. Richard had aged since I'd seen him in the interrogation room. His face was gaunt, his eyes hollow. The expensive suit he wore hung loose on his frame, as if he'd lost 20 pounds in 6 weeks. Emma looked different too, pale, thin, her hair pulled back severely. She wore a conservative navy dress and no makeup. The glamorous young woman who'd manipulated my son was gone, replaced by someone trying desperately to look innocent and victimized. Neither of them looked at me as I took my seat in the front row of the gallery, but I felt their awareness, felt them registering my presence like a weight on their shoulders. Good. Let them feel it. Let them know I was there, watching, remembering, refusing to let them forget what they'd done. All rise, the bailiff called. The Honorable Judge Patricia Whitmore presiding. We stood as Judge Whitmore entered a black woman in her 60s with an air of no-nonsense authority. She took her seat, adjusted her glasses, and surveyed the courtroom. Please be seated. We're here today for preliminary hearings in the matters of Commonwealth v. Richard Hayes and Commonwealth v. Emma Hayes. Let the record show that both defendants are present with counsel. Mr. Sullivan, you may proceed. Assistant District Attorney Kevin Sullivan rose, a man in his 40s with the tired eyes of someone who'd seen too many horrible crimes. He approached the bench with a thick folder of documents. Your Honor, the Commonwealth has charged Richard Hayes with first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, insurance fraud, wire fraud, embezzlement, money laundering, and tampering with a motor vehicle with intent to cause harm. Emma Hayes faces charges of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, and insurance fraud. Judge Whitmore nodded. And you're prepared to present evidence that probable cause exists for these charges? Yes, Your Honor. What followed was a methodical presentation of evidence. Sullivan showed video footage of Richard buying hacksaw blades and brake line tools at CVS. He presented surveillance video of Richard stealing Thomas's car from Jake Morrison's garage. He played portions of the burner phone messages between Emma and Justin Crawford, discussing murder methods and money splits. He showed financial records proving Richard had embezzled nearly $2 million from his law firm's client accounts. He presented testimony from Dr. Leonard Morrison admitting he'd falsified Thomas's medical records for $50,000. The evidence went on, each piece building on the last, creating an inescapable web of guilt. Richard's lawyer, Marcus Bradford, objected repeatedly. Hearsay, Your Honor. Circumstantial. Lack of proper chain of custody. But Judge Whitmore overruled most of the objections. This wasn't a trial. The standard of proof was lower. The prosecutor only needed to show probable cause, not guilt beyond reasonable doubt. When Sullivan presented the video of my confrontation with Richard, my voice clear and strong telling him he'd killed our son for $5 million, I saw several jurors wipe their eyes. Even Judge Whitmore's expression softened with sympathy. Your Honor, Sullivan said, The Commonwealth has presented overwhelming evidence that Richard Hayes and Emma Hayes conspired to murder Thomas Hayes for financial gain. They cut his brake lines, stole his car to ensure he'd drive the sabotaged vehicle, and planned to murder Thomas's mother, Margaret Hayes, as well to inherit her estate. This is premeditated murder in its most calculated form. The Commonwealth requests that both defendants be held to answer these charges at trial. Bradford stood to make his argument. Your Honor, while the Commonwealth has presented evidence of an affair and some questionable financial transactions, they have not proven beyond reasonable doubt that my client committed murder. The so-called confession at the funeral was made under extreme emotional duress. The video shows my client crying, clearly devastated by his son's death. Any statements made in that state cannot be considered reliable. This is a probable cause hearing, Mr. Bradford, not a trial, Judge Whitmore said. The standard is whether a reasonable person could believe a crime was committed, not whether guilt is proven. Do you have evidence that contradicts the Commonwealth's presentation? We have character witnesses who will testify that Richard Hayes was a loving father. Not relevant to probable cause. Anything else? Bradford deflated slightly. No, Your Honor. Emma's attorney, Constance Pierce, stood next. Your Honor, my client was a 25-year-old woman manipulated by an older, powerful man. Richard Hayes groomed her, controlled her, forced her into this scheme through threats and emotional abuse. Emma Hayes is as much a victim as Thomas Hayes. Does your client deny being present when the brake lines were cut? Judge Whitmore asked. She denies knowing what was happening. Richard told her they were doing routine car maintenance. Does she deny the text messages on the burner phone discussing murder methods and payment splits? Pierce hesitated. Those messages were sent under duress. Richard threatened to harm her if she didn't cooperate. So she does admit to sending them? Under duress, Your Honor. Judge Whitmore made notes. I'll take that into consideration. Anything else? We ask that Emma Hayes's bail be reduced. She's not a flight risk. She has no criminal history prior to this. She attempted to stab Margaret Hayes with a kitchen knife in her own home, Sullivan interrupted. She's shown herself to be violent and dangerous. That was self-defense. Mrs. Hayes confronted her, in Mrs. Hayes's own home, which Emma Hayes had broken into. Judge Whitmore held up a hand. Enough. I've heard sufficient arguments. She flipped through her notes, taking her time. The courtroom was silent except for the scratch of her pen. If this part touched something deep inside you, hit that like button so I know it reached you. Do you see your own reflection in this character's journey? Tell me in the comments your story might just inspire someone else. Finally, she looked up. Having reviewed the evidence presented by the Commonwealth, I find probable cause exists to believe that Richard Hayes and Emma Hayes did willfully and with premeditation murder Thomas Hayes. I further find probable cause for the additional charges of conspiracy, attempted murder of Margaret Hayes, and financial fraud. She turned to Richard and Emma. Both defendants will be held to answer these charges at trial. Bail will remain as previously set, $10 million for Richard Hayes, $5 million for Emma Hayes. Trial date is set for September 15th. This court is adjourned. The gavel came down with a sharp crack. It was done. The charges would proceed. Richard and Emma would stand trial for murdering my son. I felt Daniel's hand squeeze my shoulder, heard Judith's satisfied yes under her breath. But I couldn't move, couldn't speak. I just sat there, staring at Richard's back as bailiffs led him away in handcuffs. He turned at the doorway, his eyes finding mine across the courtroom. And for just a moment, I saw something in his expression that chilled me to the bone. Not remorse, not regret, not even fear. Rage. Pure, undiluted rage at being caught, exposed, humiliated. The rage of a man who believed he was above consequences, discovering that he wasn't. Then he was gone, led back to his cell to await trial. Emma followed moments later, her head down, her shoulders shaking with manufactured sobs, playing the victim to the very end. Margaret? Judith's voice pulled me back to the present. Are you okay? I don't know, I said honestly. That look Richard gave me. I saw it, Daniel said grimly. He's not done fighting. Not by a long shot. Neither am I said. If he wants a war, he's got one. Outside the courthouse, reporters mobbed us again. This time, with Judith's permission, I stopped. I have a brief statement, I said, and the crowd fell silent, cameras focusing, microphones thrusting forward. Today, Justice moved forward. The Commonwealth presented overwhelming evidence that my husband, Richard Hayes, and his co-conspirator, Emma Hayes, murdered my son, Thomas, for money. This preliminary hearing is just the first step. In September, they will stand trial, and I will be there every single day to ensure that justice is finally served. My voice didn't shake. My hands didn't tremble. I was done being the victim, done hiding, done staying silent. Thomas Hayes was 26 years old. He was an environmental engineer, a father, a son. He had his whole life ahead of him. Richard and Emma took that life for $5 million. I will spend every day until their conviction making sure the world remembers what they did. Thank you. I turned and walked away, Daniel and Judith flanking me, leaving the reporters shouting questions at my back. That evening, video of my statement went viral. News outlets replayed it on loop. Social media exploded with support. Justice for Thomas. Margaret Hayes is a warrior. This is what strength looks like. But I didn't feel like a warrior. I felt like a 77-year-old woman who was exhausted beyond measure, who wanted nothing more than to close her eyes and never open them again. Except I couldn't. Because Thomas deserved justice. Sophie deserved a grandmother who fought. And I deserved to see Richard and Emma pay for every single thing they'd done. So I would keep fighting. For however long it took, until justice was finally, completely served. 7 months passed between the preliminary hearing and the trial. 7 months of therapy sessions with Dr. Rebecca Walsh, of slowly learning to sleep without nightmares, of rebuilding a life from rubble. 7 months of watching Sophie grow more confident, seeing her laugh more freely, hearing her call James Grandpa Jim without hesitation. 7 months of Daniel refusing to let me sink into despair, pulling me forward one day at a time. 7 months of Lily becoming less like Thomas's ex-girlfriend and more like the daughter I'd never had. And 7 months of waiting for September 15th, the day Richard and Emma would finally face justice. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Every morning I dressed carefully, ate breakfast I couldn't taste, and rode to the courthouse with Daniel. Every day I sat in the front row of the gallery, directly in Richard's line of sight, refusing to look away. The prosecution presented their case methodically. Video evidence, financial records, text messages, testimony from Marcus Chen, from Dr. Danja, Morrison, from Jake the mechanic who'd found the cut brake lines. Emma, true to her plea agreement, testified against Richard. She sat on the witness stand in a demure gray suit and told the jury everything, how Richard had pursued her. How he'd proposed the insurance scheme, how he'd researched brake line sabotage for weeks, how he'd personally cut the lines while she watched. He told me it was the only way, Emma said, tears streaming down her face in a performance worthy of an Oscar. He said Thomas was going to ruin everything. That we'd lose everything if Thomas told Margaret about us. I was scared. I was young. I didn't know what to do. Richard's lawyer, Bradford, tried to paint Emma as the mastermind. Isn't it true that you were the one who suggested taking out life insurance on Thomas? He demanded during cross-examination. Richard suggested it first, Emma insisted. He said it would look suspicious if we didn't have insurance. That married couples always have policies on each other. And the text messages to Justin Crawford discussing murder methods, those were Richard's idea too. Richard told me what to write. He controlled everything. Lies, all lies. But the jury seemed to believe her. Young, beautiful, crying Emma, manipulated by the older, powerful attorney. The narrative her lawyer had crafted was taking hold. When it was the defense's turn, Bradford called character witnesses who testified about Richard's reputation as a devoted father and husband, colleagues who swore he'd never shown signs of violence, friends who insisted this was all a terrible misunderstanding. But then the prosecution called me to the stand. I'd been dreading this moment for 7 months. Dreading having to sit 15 feet from Richard and recount our marriage, his betrayal, the destruction he'd caused. But when Assistant DA Sullivan asked his first question, Mrs. Hayes, "How long were you married to the defendant?" I found my voice was steady. 43 years. I married Richard Hayes in 1977. I was 29 years old. I thought he was the love of my life. And during those 43 years, did you notice anything unusual about your husband's behavior? Not until the last year. He became distant, secretive. He'd started moving money without telling me. having private phone conversations, coming home late without explanation. Did you confront him about these changes? Yes, he told me I was being paranoid, that I was imagining things because I was getting older. He made me doubt my own perceptions. I looked directly at Richard. He gaslit me for an entire year while he plotted to murder our son. Bradford objected. Your Honor, the witness is offering opinion, not fact. Sustained, Judge Whitmore said. Mrs. Hayes, please stick to what you personally observed. I continued, describing the financial theft, the discovery of Thomas's evidence, the confrontation at the funeral. I detailed every lie, every manipulation, every moment of betrayal. And through it all, Richard sat stone-faced, refusing to show emotion. When Bradford cross-examined me, he tried to make me seem vindictive. Isn't it true, Mrs. Hayes, that you're testifying today because you want revenge on your husband for having an affair? No, I said calmly. I'm testifying because my son was murdered and his killer deserves to be held accountable. The affair is secondary to the murder. If Richard had simply divorced me and married Emma, I would have been hurt. But I wouldn't be here. I'm here because they killed Thomas. You've received quite a bit of media attention from this case, haven't you? Book deals, movie offers. I've turned down every single one, I said. I don't want money from my son's death, I want justice. Bradford tried for another hour to shake my testimony, to find inconsistencies or emotional outbursts he could exploit. But I'd prepared with Sullivan for weeks. I knew every answer, anticipated every trap. When I finally stepped down from the witness stand, I felt lighter. I'd told Thomas's story. I'd spoken truth in a room full of lawyers trained to twist words, and I'd done it without breaking. The jury deliberated for 4 days. 4 days of agonizing uncertainty, of pacing Daniel's apartment, of wondering if Richard's expensive lawyers had found a way to create reasonable doubt. On the 4th day, we got the call. The jury has reached a verdict. We rushed to the courthouse. The courtroom was packed reporters, court watchers, victims' rights advocates, everyone wanting to witness the conclusion of Boston's most sensational trial in decades. Richard and Emma were brought in separately. Richard looked defiant, his chin raised, refusing to show weakness. Emma looked terrified, her face blotchy from crying. Has the jury reached a verdict? Judge Whitmore asked. We have, Your Honor, the foreman replied, standing. In the matter of Commonwealth versus Richard Hayes, on the charge of first-degree murder in the death of Thomas Hayes, how do you find? We find the defendant guilty. The courtroom erupted. I felt Daniel grab my hand, felt Lily's arm around my shoulders. Tears streamed down my face, not of sadness, but of relief, so profound I couldn't contain it. Order! Judge Whitmore's gavel cracked. I will have order in this court. The foreman continued reading. Guilty of conspiracy to commit murder, guilty of attempted murder of Margaret Hayes, guilty of insurance fraud, wire fraud, embezzlement, money laundering. Guilty, guilty, guilty. Every single charge. Then it was Emma's turn. Because she'd testified and taken a plea deal, she'd already pleaded guilty to reduce charges, but the judge still had to formally accept the plea and impose sentence. Emma Hayes, you have pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and conspiracy. You have cooperated with the Commonwealth's prosecution of your co-defendant. In exchange, the Commonwealth has recommended a sentence of 20 years, with eligibility for parole after 15. Does the defense have anything to say before I impose sentence? Emma's lawyer stood. Your Honor, my client was a victim herself. She was groomed and manipulated by an older man in a position of power. She deeply regrets her actions and asks for the court's mercy. Mrs. Hayes, Judge Whitmore looked at me. As the victim's mother, you have the right to make an impact statement before I impose sentence. Would you like to speak? I stood on shaking legs and approached the podium. Emma wouldn't look at me, her eyes fixed on the floor. Emma Hayes, I began. You were 25 years old when you married my son. You were young, yes, but you were not a child. You knew right from wrong. And you chose wrong over and over again. My voice grew stronger. You chose to have an affair with your husband's father. You chose to help plan his murder. You chose to stand by and watch while Richard cut brake lines that would kill the man you'd promised to love and cherish. And then you chose to plot my murder too, discussing it casually in text messages like you were planning a dinner party. Emma was crying now, her shoulders shaking. "You will serve 15 years minimum," I continued. "You'll be 40 years old when you're released. You'll still have a life ahead of you. But Thomas will be dead forever. He'll never be 40. He'll never see his daughter graduate from high school. He'll never grow old, never fall in love again, never get a second chance, because you and Richard took all his chances away." I leaned forward slightly. "I hope those 15 years are long. I hope every single day in prison you remember what you did. And I hope that when you finally get out, you spend the rest of your life trying to become someone worthy of the second chance you don't deserve." I stepped back. Judge Whitmore nodded. "Emma Hayes, I hereby sentence you to 20 years in the Massachusetts Correctional Institution for Women, with eligibility for parole after 15 years. You are remanded to custody immediately." Emma was led away, still sobbing. Then it was Richard's turn. "Richard Hayes," Judge Whitmore said, her voice hard as granite, "you have been found guilty of first-degree murder, conspiracy, attempted murder, and numerous financial crimes. The Commonwealth has presented overwhelming evidence of your guilt. Before I impose sentence, do you have anything to say?" Richard stood. For a moment I thought he might actually apologize, might show some glimmer of remorse or humanity. Instead, he turned to me. "Margaret," he said, his voice cold and clear, "you destroyed our family. You could have kept quiet. We could have all moved forward. But you had to play the martyr. Had to make yourself the victim. This is your fault as much as mine." The audacity of it took my breath away. Even now, convicted of murdering his own son, Richard was blaming me. "Mr. Hayes," Judge Whitmore cut him off sharply, "that's quite enough. Your lack of remorse is noted. Richard Hayes, I sentence you to life in prison without possibility of parole. Additionally, I impose consecutive sentences totaling 60 years for your financial crimes. You will die in prison, Mr. Hayes. Take him away." As bailiffs led Richard from the courtroom, he looked back at me one final time, and I saw it then, the complete absence of conscience, the hollow space where his soul should have been. He wasn't sorry. He would never be sorry. He was simply angry he'd been caught. But he was going to prison forever, and that would have to be enough. Outside the courthouse, I made one final statement to the press. Today, justice was served. Richard Hayes and Emma Hayes have been held accountable for murdering my son Thomas. But this case taught me lessons that go far beyond one family's tragedy. I looked directly into the cameras. This case taught me that evil can hide behind familiar faces, that the people closest to you can be the most dangerous. That blind trust without vigilance can cost you everything you love. These are hard lessons, difficult knowledge to carry, but they're educational truths that could save someone else's life. I learned that financial independence matters, that every person, especially women, should have their own accounts, their own knowledge of family finances, their own safety nets. That signing papers without reading them, trusting blindly without questioning these things can destroy you. This educational principle saved my life when I finally started asking questions. I learned that when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. Richard showed me signs for years, the secrecy, the gaslighting, the emotional distance. I ignored those signs because I wanted to believe in my marriage. That's knowledge I wish I'd had 40 years ago. It's educational wisdom I'm sharing now so others don't make my mistakes. And most importantly, I learned that it's never too late to fight back. I'm 77 years old. I could have given up, accepted defeat, let Richard and Emma steal everything and everyone I loved. Instead, I fought, and I won. That's a lesson, a piece of knowledge, an educational truth I want every person watching to understand. You are never too old, never too tired, never too broken to stand up for justice. I took a breath. This case has taught me profound lessons about trust, about vigilance, about the importance of protecting yourself even from those you love. This knowledge, this education about human nature and the darkness people can hide, I'm sharing it so that perhaps one person watching might recognize warning signs in their own life, might ask questions before it's too late, might save themselves or someone they love. To everyone who supported my family through this nightmare, thank you. To those who are going through similar situations, don't give up. And to my son Thomas, wherever you are, we got them, baby. Justice was finally served. Dear friends, thank you for watching this story. If you found it meaningful, If it taught you something, if it moved you or made you think about your own relationships and the importance of staying vigilant even with those closest to you, please subscribe to this channel, Voices of Auntie Rose. Click that subscribe button, hit the like icon, and share this story with others who might need to hear it. Every day, we bring you compelling stories that aren't just entertainment, they're education. They're knowledge that could change your life. They're lessons drawn from real human experience about how to protect yourself, how to recognize danger, how to fight back when necessary. I want to hear from you. How did this story make you feel? Does it remind you of situations in your own life? Have you ever had to confront someone you trusted who betrayed you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your experiences, your wisdom, your educational insights from your own lives, they matter. They can help someone else who's struggling. What lessons, what knowledge, what educational truths did you take away from Margaret's story? Tell me in the comments. Let's build a community where we learn from each other's experiences, where we share the hard-won wisdom that could save someone's life or soul. And to all of you watching this today, I wish you good health, happiness in your daily lives, and peace in your hearts. May you have the wisdom to recognize danger, the courage to confront it, and the strength to survive whatever challenges life brings. Take care of yourselves, protect yourselves, trust, but verify. Love, but maintain your independence. And never, ever ignore the warning signs when someone shows you who they really are. Thank you for being part of Voices of Auntie Rose. Until next time, stay safe, stay strong, and remember knowledge is power, education is protection, and the lessons we learn from others' pain can become the wisdom that saves our own lives. Goodbye for now, and I'll see you in the next video.